for your intro. It's your job.
Alrighty. Welcome, everybody, to episode 25 of the Reptile Rejects podcast. This evening we got William Filipek of TJW Exotics. And yeah, how are you doing this evening, William?
Doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. It's a pleasure to have another Python guy on, and I'm sure Dominic's happy to have more Python people on
It's
the
a
podcast.
great day, guys. Less colubrid talk today, more Python. So to me, it's going to be a really really good episode. But I'm sure Michael will somehow manage to sneak it in there all the time. So I believe in you, Michael.
Uh,
Yeah, we'll see about that. I'm
yeah,
not sure if William even keeps too many colubrids.
yeah, not anymore. I used to do a lot of North American stuff and a few Asian. I'm more Lamper peltis stuff. I like a lot of the kings and milks and stuff like that. If I were to keep colubrids, those would probably be more the colubrids I'd keep is a bunch of different species and localities of them if I could. But that and some Asian species. There's some Asian colubrids that are pretty cool. Like I've always was the cocks I always thought were cool, mandarins and what was it? The hunter flower rats. Those guys, Mollendorfis. I always thought were neat. But being a python guy, it's hard to keep some of those species on a python room.
Oh yeah, Mollendorfi, they like that room temperature kind of.
Yeah,
They'd rather be in that mid to low 70s
yeah,
kind of thing most of the time. But they're freaking cool. I had a pair for a year because my friend was like, I kind of want to get out of him, and I sold them back to her, and yeah, she still has them, and I think she just got another because they're just freaking cool.
oh, they're beautiful.
They're unique though. Like they kind of all have their own like quirks to them as well.
There's
Whoops.
somebody at the door there,
Oh,
Mike. You should go answer that. Listen, before we go too much deeper into the conversation, Michael, why don't you catch us up? What's new with you this week? Anything new? And then we'll go me, and then we'll go to William.
Or you go, Dom. Dog's barking.
Uh,
So
sure. For me, honestly, animals are still cooled down. Cleaning cages is amazing. There's basically nothing to clean. Maybe one or two animals go to the washroom. That's about it. Like we're just talking about urine. Temperatures keep going down, so it's kind of getting nice. Like I'm podcasting now in my room like usual, and I'm wearing pants and a long sleeve shirt, and I'm not cooking. It's kind of a nice thing. What else? Decided to buy a couple more heat panels because I want to put the diamonds on heat panels. And I bought a couple more, another herb stats. So I've been slowly changing my herb stats. Well, not changing my herb stats, changing to herb stats. Had the Ingbirds. I don't know if anybody ever uses them. They're great. They're super cheap. They last really well for a year and a half, and then they die. And I've had over probably 70 or 80 of those little Inkbirds, and I've been doing it for 5 or 6 years. And I've had enough of always changing them. So every now and then I keep adding another herb stat, changing six at a time, and did that again and ordered more from. This time I went with a new guy. I went with your guy from last week, Mr. Greg West. So we'll see how it is. Maybe we can put an update on how good his customer service was, which I assume will be very good. So anyway, I ordered more. And except for that, man, not much is new. How about you, Mike?
not too much. Looking at houses out where I look to possibly move to in the future. So that's kind of fun. Eyeballing up what could be a future reptile room and whatnot, and all those fun things, and thinking about what I actually want for a reptile room, and do I want two or three kind of thing for since I talking to was it some other guys like the subox needing a little less humidity, so it's like okay, I don't want to do one big room because if I got some fish tanks or some newts going, the newts can't be in the warm room either, so gotta strategically think of how I'd want to set stuff up and whatnot and all that. So that's exciting. Uh, Nothing really new with animals. Most of my collection's information. Everybody else is feeding and doing well. That's not information, which is just the grow outs and a couple other things. Lots of baby fish to feed too, but need to get rid of those still. Yeah, not too much. I think Greg could. I think he'll be just fine with your customer service there, though. Big discount. Probably not, but yeah, it's
I didn't
with
get
the
anything, but I didn't ask for it.
yeah. Yeah, with I honestly don't think cage makers really make too much off of that stuff. It's like working at a pet store and stuff. Like some things, like they really can't upsell enough. Like you can't really ask too much more money than what you think, because like they have to pay a certain amount for the product straight from the supplier, and it's like when you think people are making millions of dollars, they're not necessarily making millions of dollars, kind of thing. Sometimes margins are actually pretty tight, so don't ask for a discount, but often good business guys will give you a discount sometimes, or just wait for show season. Often guys will give you either no shipping kind of thing or discount for ordering before the show. So it's all stuff you want to look out for. But yeah,
Yeah, again,
alrighty.
I wouldn't ask it. I figure that's somebody's livelihood, right? What's saving 15, 20, 30, 40 bucks for me? Honestly, I don't really care,
Yeah,
but and I also
for
feel
sure.
always bad asking. It's kind of like when you try to buy a snake, right? It's advertised at 200 and somebody comes, "Will you take 180?" and you're like, "Oh fuck." It's like, I guess, but like, is it really like I don't know. I never understood people who do it. And don't get me wrong, if it's 5,000 bucks and you're like, I'll offer you 4,500, I think that's perfectly acceptable. But on an animal that's 60 bucks and you're offering 55 or things like that, I'm like, come on, man. Anyway, yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Uh,
The worst is when, like, because I help Tyrone vend, and when somebody comes up to the table and is like, so like, say it's like $1,000 thing, and they're like, would you do 700 or something? And then the guy doesn't even actually want to buy it. It's like the worst thing is when they ask for a discount and then they don't actually even want to buy it. It's like what the hell?
or the ridiculous amount. Like, would you do 200 on $1,000 animal? You're like, no. Like,
Oh yeah. Or the best
there's not
is
even.
there's
I
also
go
like,
for it.
was it once we had a guy come up and wanted a discount on a pair of water snakes, and was like, would you do but he like basically asked for wholesale, like 50% of what it was worth. He's like, I'm kind of a new reptile breeder now, and like just trying to like upsell that. It was like freaking hilarious.
I just
Basically
answer
told him that.
actually when people do that to me. I'm like, yeah, actually, I do sell them sometimes at that price, but there's a minimum of 20 that you need to buy at a time. So if you are interested, hit me up. But if not, no, you're paying full price, like just like everyone else. All
Yeah,
right, well,
gotta love those things.
yeah, fuck. Uh, William, welcome. Happy to have you on, man. How have you been?
Not too bad. Just getting ready, just like you guys. I'm getting ready to start pairing stuff up. It's just starting to get to that temperature, that sweet spot in the temperatures where I start or like pairing stuff up. Because I've prematurely done it where it was still kind of warm at night, and I've had some carpets not really get into the groove of things and decide. I've had even male and females combat with each other before because they didn't want to be near each other, so they'd start fighting. Not always, but I've had it with female, like a lot of different pythons where a female wasn't ready, so she would buck and push the male away, and the carpet one was really interesting because those guys actually like combat it, like just like what you would see in the wild, like one head over the other trying to push the other down, and then like the next week when it dropped down to 75 or 74 or whatever at night, then it just like, ooh, they were fine with each other, you know.
And were you sure it was male and female there?
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
building follicles. She didn't end up laying, but she did build follicles, and I've seen a couple locks after that. So yeah, and it was weird. They never had problems before. It's this one year they just didn't want anything to do with each other or whatever, or at least till the temperatures dropped to, I guess, sufficient enough to where they felt more okay with each other.
So just by curiosity, when do you actually start pairing your carpets? I don't even know what you keep. We'll go into that after, but just because you brought that up, you're talking about putting them soon. Um, I guess I'm looking at it right now, and I think I tend to pair up around Christmas ish. And if I'm too impatient, I start putting things now. But
Right,
it's always about trying to wait. Like I'm gonna wait until the
right,
next big snowfall, then I'll do it.
right. Yeah, mine's just more like temperatures. Like once I hit I don't know. I noticed like the sweet spot seems to be that 73 to 74 or 75 where they seem to really notice, oh, something's different, as far as like temperatures feel a little more, I don't know if it's brisk or whatever to them, but they notice a difference. And then I have to time it right too, because I noticed you guys were talking about, you do a lot of I don't know if you consider it old school or more of the Australian way, kind of like what Nick would do, where you feed in the beginning of the season and then stop feeding. I do that with my most of my Australian stuff, but all my Indonesian, African, uh, Southeast Asian stuff, I feed during the winter and the cool down. So, but I'm not cooling stuff too low. But 70 is about January is when I get the coldest. I'll set the thermostat to 70 and it'll get whatever it'll get. I'm sure some spots get 68 to 72, depending on where it is in each room. Because I got 4 individual rooms, and then I got a little cool room too, like a cold room for some of the cooler species.
Is this in
How
a
about
shop or is this in your
A
basement?
building, yeah, standalone building. Yeah, it
on
has
your
like,
property?
well, it's on my parents' property. They had the land. They brought it up. They go, "Hey, would you be interested?" Because they own snakes. They have quite a few snakes, and they said, "Would you be interested in putting the building on our property?" And I said, I didn't really think much of it because I was doing fine in just a small bedroom, well, it wasn't small. It was a 16 by 12 bedroom with like an 8 by 6 walk-in closet where I kept all the babies. So it was pretty efficient, but I knew I wanted to work with more species and stuff, particularly with the larger stuff, because I've always was fascinated with large constrictors too. So, and then the building kind of gave me the ability to work with some of the big stuff. So I was like, sure, if you guys are okay with it, I'm fine with getting something put up here. And we worked on it in 2023 and then 2024, literally the beginning, end of December of 2023 and beginning of January, we start moving everything in. So it's been 2 years now since I've had everything in this building, and it's nice because I'm able to like actually cool things the way I wanted to, compared to like where before I had to set all these thermostats up and hope they were all set right and within a certain parameter of time or whatever. Compared to now, everything's mostly ambient, or if they do have some sort of heat, they get like timers, like on off timers rather than digital ones that sometimes I think can be unreliable, at least from my experience when I've worked with them. So I generally do the on off with pretty much anything, even my uh, what is it, space heaters that Johnson thermostats that control the room, because I just heat everything ambient for the most part. It makes it easier to keep it all a certain temperature range than it is to each individual enclosure or rack system to have its own kind of heating system. I've ran into more problems doing stuff like that, like slug outs and mainly, infertility or fertility issues and stuff. So, yeah.
Something that I think would be really cool. Do you mind going into? You said you've got 4 rooms. Can you go into your 4 rooms? Say like, room one, these are the parameters I keep. These are the animals I keep. Kind of go quickly so we kind of have an idea of what it is you keep and kind of like how you keep them separately.
Okay. So the rooms, when you walk into the building, the first thing you'd see if you walk in is the nursery, which is it's essentially the room that isn't against any exterior wall. But then the first room to the when you walk into the left is I call it the ball python room. But when we had the pipes laid, the room ended up being bigger than I was anticipating. So it has some other miscellaneous stuff in it, like my bloods, my angolans, some womas, and then a few boa species I keep. And they keep like all the rooms are kept pretty similar. Obviously, each room's going to fluctuate differently because it's just you can't get them all exact, but they all stay all the same, even cycle wise. I keep all the cycles similar. The only thing I'll do differently is food cycling, for some of the stuff, not all of it. And then right next to that would be the miscellaneous room, which is pretty much all my small to mid range pythons, like my carpets, my Antaresia, green pythons, liasses, smaller Malayo python stuff, just a lot of basically all the weird different pythons I could get. And then next to that would be the nursery room or the baby room, and then all the way in the back and it's the biggest room in the building. It's like 500 square feet or 600 square feet or something. It's just for the big constrictors. Basically anything that gets 8+ feet or 9+ feet, goes into that room. So my big mainland retics, mainland berms, rocks, Indians, Sri Lankans, all the big stuff.
All the fun stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Dom has more experience than me with that stuff, though, because Dom had an African rock when he was a younger lad.
Well, I've worked with every single big snake working in the zoo for 10 years there. I worked in a small reptile zoo and we had just about everything. But I kept two African rocks for a very, very long time, probably about 8 or 9 years. And my largest female was maybe about 13 and a half feet, and she was about 115 pounds. So enough that she was impressive and she was a psychopath.
They're
And
they're in, they're definitely interesting. I don't know if you've
uh,
noticed this with rocks. Is my So all my big snakes, I'm talking like Indian Sri Lankans and the berms and the retics will all come straight to you, and it's they may not. Some will strike at you, but a lot of them will come up to you to see what you have. The rock python will sit there motionless, don't move a muscle unless food's right in front of its face. But if it's just the cage opening, it just sits there and won't move. Or if it's even if the cage isn't open, it would just sit there. And it seems to know whenever I turn, and when it would see me turn is when it would hit the glass or move. And I go, oh, wait, it reminds me of the raptor off Jurassic Park. It was like you could tell she was very methodical on when she decided to strike. So I was like, that's pretty interesting compared to like I said, all the other big ones they would either come straight up or they would just strike out at you and hope to grab something. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So when you
yeah.
worked with the rock pythons, you guys work with Netalensis up there, or just the central or Sebi?
Uh, I would say just the typical Sebi. I don't
Okay.
think I've ever seen in real life the other ones. The other thing I was going to note about the African rocks is that to me the body composition was very different. It almost looked more like boa than a python, right?
Oh
Most
yeah.
pythons like it almost has that like oval and like just a lot higher but very narrow. It's I don't know how else to explain it. Like a boa constrictor has much more of that body shape
Yeah.
than other pythons. Like it just to me, it was just the muscle tone was just impressive compared to other big snakes.
Oh
But
yeah. They're definitely.
maybe it was just mine, but that's what I've noticed.
Yeah, they're definitely. They can eat huge prey for an animal that like relative to head size. They probably have one of the smaller heads out of all the big constrictors, but they can take down some eat some. They'll eat the same size prey items. I'd feed the mainland retics or the berms and stuff like that. They do grow a little slower, not much, but I can tell they don't put on the length quite as quickly as the berms do. But they're not far off. I mean, my female one, I have a pair of rocks that are with a buddy of mine, and then I have a lone female that whenever I got the building put up, I was like, all right, I want to get at least one more rock female just so I can keep permanently at the facility. So, he, and then I got berms around the same time, and the berms I mean, those guys grew so quickly. I mean, nothing like the retics are just phenomenal how fast they grow. It's insane. It's like a foot, like, and I cycle feed even younger animals, so I'm not pounding. I pound them with big prey items, but I don't feed them every single week year round. They'll get every other week or once a month a really big prey item. Then I won't feed for even young animals. That's my method of growing stuff is just I'd rather feed less but give it super big prey items, which is what I think would most baby pythons would typically do to try to get out of that infant stage as quickly as possible compared to just feeding a multitude. But then sometimes you get some pythons that are terrified of, things that are just too big. So then sometimes I have to dial it back a little bit. But yeah, anyways, with the rock pythons, yeah, they're an interesting big python. I've never got to work with Netalensis. I always hear they're tamer. When I went to South Africa, I did get to handle one wild specimen, but it was just a neonate, so it wasn't very big. So, and I always was told they were a little more easygoing compared to
Are
the Central
are they in
African.
the U.S. at all
Well,
anymore?
it used to be Bob Clark. He's told me he's bred them. I think a few other older guys are telling me they've bred them, but they kind of disappeared in herpetoculture. And then what was it? I posted a picture when I went to South Africa. I got a picture of me holding this Netherlands baby, and I posted. I tend to go in rants and stuff in some of my posts, like it's a shame that we don't have these in herpetoculture anymore. It's one of those animals that when the rocks and the Burmese morse picked up, a lot of those other big constrictors without morse or hardly any morses went to the wayside. And you see it even in medium and smaller pythons too, or reptiles in general, where they just disappear into the ether because, morse literally took. Because I mean, in what reality was a retic any better than a rock python? I mean, they could both inflict serious damage on you and could be very dangerous regardless. Well, it's simply because one had a lot more plethora of morse and was being sold for more. So they, I guess, full circle, yeah, they're allegedly still around. I hear about when I posted that picture, I had someone say, "Oh, they're still in the U.S." And it was some guy I'd never heard of, didn't know who he was, and I messaged him after that, and I said, would you clarify that a little bit more? Like, are you able to talk to or tell me who it is? And he goes, no, they don't want to be known. One of those old school guys that don't want no one to know who they are. And he's like, I'll give him your contact information. He'll contact you if he wants to talk to you. And then come to find out, he has it in a place he probably shouldn't. So it's like, oh, okay. So I don't know if it's
sneak
true
it out.
I was trying to get someone, because I had another buddy tell me the same exact thing, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go herping with them," and I told him, "Hey, if you go to his place, take a picture of him." And he's like, "Oh, he doesn't want people to like shit or something for it because he doesn't want people to." I go, "No, a pure Netherlands is pretty different looking. Like if you see them side by side, they look really different looking. Like they look more different than an Indian and a Burmese python do. And technically, they're older as far as split wise goes. I mean, Burms and Indians are only like 5 million years separation between each other, and South African and Central African rocks are nearly 12 or 13 years of separation, million years of separation between the two. So, I mean, there's they definitely their own thing. They're not, they're not a North African or Central African rock for sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I love the look of African rocks. Like, just that's why I got the Angolans. Kind of like Angolans have their own cool look,
Yeah,
but the African rocks are, yeah, obviously African rocks are also like fucking way bigger. But yeah,
yeah. Well, they can like that's another thing too. I mean, a lot of those big constrictors can stay relatively small, and it drives me nuts when I hear people say that's neglect for a python. But I go, pythons have been around longer than most mammals have been around. I go, they're used to fluctuation and prey source and prey availability, so their bodies will adjust. I mean, the what's his name? Rick Shine with the water pythons. Their bodies will adapt to however the environment. If there's not abundance of food, it's not that they won't breed; they just don't get as big to reproduce, and it takes longer compared to when it's tons of prey items. They'll grow quickly, reproduce at a younger age. It's not that they can't handle it. It's just we just had this thought that it needs to be fed all the time. So and then big snake people also go to the side where they want these big retics, but they don't feed them like they want them big. I go, when you get these 20-foot retics, you don't feed it a 20 or 30-pound rabbit or pig. You feed it a foal or a calf. You got to feed it something like a substantially large prey item if you want that really big, size. Because I've noticed big prey items will cause more length than a bunch of smaller prey items will. So I don't know. I can go on so many different rants, guys. I'll start getting off on all these.
oh, this is
different
fantastic.
They'll
I was
just
gonna say it's
roll
all good.
into different philosophies I have.
So a couple of things. Number one, with the fowl things like that. When I worked at the zoo, that's what we would do. We had a lot of contacts through farms, and we'd get baby pigs, baby goats, baby sheep, anything that would die. They would freeze, and then we'd just collect them, and you'd get tons of everything, and it was amazing feeding that.
Yeah, I was
Going
say,
back,
you probably got
sorry,
it
go
for
ahead.
free. I was going to say
Yeah,
you probably got
all free.
stillborn. I mean, what did it? I hear it like in the U.S. they just leave it out for the wild animals to eat. So if you just tell them, hey, can you just take it and put it in the freezer for me, and I'll come pick it up
Yeah.
later or something for Yeah, I was just like, I wouldn't imagine it'd be expensive. It just people don't realize how big a prey item some of these just snakes and pythons in general can eat. I mean, they can eat stupid big prey items as long as they're not overweight. I think the caveat is, you hear those people who would feed bigger prey items and they'd have a python like regurge or just have issues and die. Right? I think there's a caveat to it. If the animal's lean and you give a big prey item to, I think it's safer than if the animal already has accumulation of fat and then you give it that huge prey item, and now when it goes through that organ cycle of just doubling and tripling in size, and the blood plasma thickens, and then on top of it you have all this fat sitting on it. I think that's what causes some of those pythons, all pythons, that eat some really big prey items and then keel over dead because it essentially just had a
Cardiac
heart
event.
attack. Yeah, they just ended up dying. So
Yeah, I think a lot of what's the way I should put this? So I'm not talking specifically about the zoo I worked at, but I'll just say that a lot of the zoos often use animals as shows, right? They like to show off animals eating big prey items because it's really cool. It's good for education. You can have an animal eating right on the floor in front of people for freaking 2, 3, 4 hours, right? When you give it something huge, and that was done all the time. I think a lot of these zoos though don't do the natural cycling and don't do the whole cooling down and not feeding their pythons for 4 or 5 months at a time, right? So,
yeah,
and they feed them much more often because it can be done a lot more often for the public and such, which I feel is probably a detriment to the animals. But again, I don't want to say all zoos do that. I can say specifically 20 years ago when I used to work at a zoo, I know that's what was done, but 20 years ago, the way we kept is not at all the way we're keeping now, right?
yeah.
So I totally agree with you. And you look at most of the people now keeping their animals, or if I talked about myself specifically, I have no problems feeding gigantic prey animals. But then after that, I literally don't feed anything for 6 months except if it's a neonate, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to think that that makes a pretty big difference. So going back, since we're talking about just big animals, so African rocks where I live, and I'm assuming it's the same for Mike. Honestly, they're kind of throwaway animals. They're animals that have zero value. You can buy them for very, very cheap, and then as soon as they get bigger than a year old, they're 7, 8, 10 feet. Um, you have to give them away, and they're very hard to place or to find homes for. So again, I'm curious, is it the same where you are? And do you have them to breed them? Do you have them just to keep them? And if you breed them, are you able to move them? Do they have value?
Oh, well, before I answer that, I have a question for you. You guys still allowed to import rock pythons and stuff? Because I thought after that whole
Probably,
incident,
as long as
I
they're not
thought
CITES 1, it should be.
after that
As,
issue you had with those kids allegedly, I don't know if it was true or not, being killed years ago. I thought there was some law put in about big
No,
constrictors or
no,
something.
none of
Okay,
that is true. None of that is
depends
true.
okay,
on the just depends on the province. Like I'm not allowed to keep any big stuff here, and Alberta's the same. Except Alberta, you can keep Bolins and Cuban boas, which is cool. Here, those are both banned already.
oh,
But in Manitoba, Ontario, and I think Quebec has like a weird system that you need to get a permit for or something. I don't know how it works, but I know there's people in Quebec that have like pied berms and stuff. Like and NBK has some big stuff too. So like, I'm not
I
sure how
so
you can, but yeah,
so provinces are like states where you are,
yeah,
right? You're from the
yep,
states.
yep,
So our provinces provincial there is not a lot of provincial rules. I can talk about Ontario because that's where I live, and it's one of the, let's say, more populated province of Canada. Is it the most populated? What do you think, Mike? It's I think Quebec and Ontario are the
yeah.
two most
Well,
populated.
for
Anyway,
sure you guys are. Yeah.
so provincial rules is almost nothing. It's just don't keep animals that live here. Don't keep indigenous animals. Basically, that's it. Then for animals for importing, or not even importing, just for keeping, it's city bylaws. So in Ottawa, I have a rule of nothing over 2 meters for pythons and boas. But if I go 15 minutes to the east, 20 minutes to the west, I'm out of Ottawa. You can keep anything you want. Venomous, you can keep crocodiles, you can keep anything, right? So and now for importing, like Mike said, as long as it's even Appendix 2, as long as you get permits, you can import. So like, so as far as I know, unless there's a ban in Africa, which I'll be honest, I've never imported anything from Africa, so I have no idea. But I don't see why you couldn't.
okay. I was just genuinely curious, but back on the rock python thing is they had a little boom. Like I remember, I think when I got my first pair in like 2019, the 2017, 2020 maybe, there was like a little. They seemed like to be a resurgence in the rock pythons a little bit. Not rock pythons never just because of reputation. I mean, you guys know they've gotten one of the hardest reputations out there when it comes to pythons, and it's some of them are deserved. Some of them, they can be pretty terrifying big snakes if you don't know what you're doing. And they're one of the few big snake outside of Indians and Sri Lankans will do it too. Well, Burms will do it, I guess. They all technically do it, but they'll get real loud and hissy with you, And if you're not a snake person, that can be terrifying when it sounds like a tire getting, releasing air in front of you or something with a bunch of teeth attached to it. But there was a little resurgence in them. Like they gained a little bit of popularity, and then it petered off for a while, and then it kind of picked up again, and then Bob produced that T negative down here. I don't know if any of you guys saw that. I didn't even know a T negative rock was a thing. I knew the T positives in Europe were a thing, but I had no idea about the T negatives. So, and yeah, and it still didn't make people super excited about rocks, even with the T negatives, because I think it's just people would rather get a T negative Burmese python or the albino Burmese because in general, they just look better looking. Rock pythons don't tend to have that good of contrast, so I don't think the adult albino is going to look as good as say like the albino Burms that still even wash out. They're not even perfect, so I don't think they'll catch up like people think they will. Now the T positives get into the U.S. I'm sure they will, but till then, you know, I don't think
Yeah.
they'll ever be
Are
like a
so
huge
you guys
foothold.
can you guys import them into the country or no?
They just magically appear because my thing is just because it's illegal doesn't mean it's going to stop criminals from bringing them in. Yeah, I hate to put it like that, but it's true. I wish I feel like that could get me in a whole nother rant. I wish Fish and Wildlife. I wish some of these governments would understand you can ban these all you want. It's not going to stop people from bringing them in. If they really want it, they're going to do it. And Americans are probably just as good as any other country at getting what they want if they want it. So, yeah, that doesn't. I
I
just
still
wish
think
they
it
go ahead.
controls it though to a certain degree, right? Like you take a look at all the Aussie animals. Yes, some of them come in, right? We
Yeah,
have all the stories of them coming in, but it's really rare, right? So it
right.
definitely reduces the amount that are coming in,
Yeah.
right? But I think it depends too if the country bans it, like the country of origin, or if the country you're living in.
Well, I think in a counter argument though is if you look at like shinglebacks, if I'm not mistaken, in Japan, there's like 800 or something a year that get smuggled out of Australia. I don't know if it's. I'm sure it's the whole group, as far as the shinglebacks go, but there's like 800 that get smuggled out. And my counter argument to that is, how many people are smuggling ball pythons out? And that's a sustainable, import, And it's like and that can go for a lot of different species. So if you make it sustainable, it can work. Yeah, you still might get people smuggling, or like say if they're trying to hit a quota, they could sneak in some wild animals, but that still doesn't equate to the numbers that are getting smuggled out of some of those countries. And some of them, there's probably a larger amount that we think that gets smuggled out. It's just how much of it survives the whole process. If you're smuggling out hundreds of them, if you get like 20 or 30 to survive out of that group, and if some of them grow up to reproduce,
Oh yeah, that's the animal welfare part of it too. Is you're
yeah,
trying to protect wildlife, but then it kind of forces people to do things shady instead of doing it correctly and importing
yeah.
and exporting correctly. So most of the animals actually live like they should.
Yeah, yeah. And then you got like with the Lacey Act, it's a little bit different. It's not like with Australia, it's more of like Fish and Wildlife uh hammering down on it, because like even in the US, I know you guys know about it with importing or exporting to the US or getting stuff from the US, it can be a hassle or downright impossible, but you can still do
I
it,
think
but
they've
it's like
figured it out No, because Dawn was able to send down those Scream Jag thing, the Stonewash
Oh,
Jags. He
they
was able to
I
call
think
send them
it.
down to Casey.
it's the first time in many years that he's done it though.
Yeah.
It's he's been having a really hard time, and now it seems that it's capable. But the problem is that it's too much of a risk. It's like, why would I go through all the trouble? And Americans don't want to send us stuff because they're worried they're going to go through all that work for nothing. That it's easier for us to just go through Europe because anything through Europe goes
Yeah,
through automatically. So why
yeah,
go through all that hassle, all that money, and all that risk for what? And Europe's animals are way cheaper than American animals, and they're the
yeah.
same thing.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think like Justin. I know Justin recently got some imports from Europe, as some Australian stuff. So it happens. From what I can tell, it seems like it's more of like who's the fish and wildlife officer of the day type of deal. If they, you know, even some of the illegal animals, I've heard stories. It kind of just depends who it is. If they check or if they even care. Or it's like how much do they care about their job to want to put an effort into looking, or so yeah. I've I hear a handful of people, but like you said, I some of them just don't want to take the risk, which I think that's what unfortunately kind of always puts the Australian U.S. market in, not in trouble because we're so big that we're usually okay with it, but always kind of hinders us and keeps us kind of isolated because of that. Now is we can't freely enter, because I remember when Nick Mutton used to bring in tons of UK Python stuff. He used to sell them on his website and all that. But and then you had a few guys did Starkey, and then who was the other guy? There was another guy who did
Precision.
Precision. Yeah, I can't remember the guy in the U.S. who used to sell his stuff, but he was. I don't think he keeps anymore, but he used to sell his stuff. So, yeah, we don't get a. Oh, and then there was a few people got Starkey animals in not too long ago. Import of stuff of his. I don't know if they just label. I'm sure they're still a pain in the butt because I know Dan Malary had issues with the Papu and Spotted, but I don't know if they just slap on all the Morelia, just because Australians don't care about the different species anyway. Just slap them all as Harrison I, or whatever, and it's like, oh, they're
Well,
legal.
I think it might just be like species, right? You just do Morelia spilota as like a species, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, so something. I don't even know how they go about doing it. I haven't gotten any else. Usually when I get my else,
Dom sent stuff to Japan.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, all my experiences with the not so us it's CBSA, Canadian Border Security. I don't know what the A stands for. Um, Association. I don't know what the fuck.
Agency.
Sure, let's go with that. But my experiences is that they have no idea what they're looking at. Literally, I could put in a Bolin's Python or a Burmese or anything, and as long as I get the permits, and the thing is, when you get the permits, you don't need animals, pictures, you don't need anything, right? It's simply a written document. You apply for them, you get the permits. After that, you wait, you get the permits in, then you put the animals in the box, staple your permits, put it in the envelope. You get to the airport, blah blah blah. You got to go see CBSA. So the border control doesn't actually even look at your animals. They look at your permits, cool, you got them, and then you bring your box, and some security guy goes through your box. But literally just a guy that's going to go through and has never seen a snake in his life. So he's looking, he's like, oh, it says 50, let me count. Cool, and he's looking, but he's not actually looking at the containers. He's looking to see if you've got powder between the styrofoam and the box. You know
right?
what I mean? Like, that's all
Yeah,
he's checking. And I've gone through many times, but he has no clue what these animals are. He's like, oh my God, are these venomous? Are they going to kill me? It's like, no. He's like, is that one a lizard? No.
no,
Like every time I've done it, no clue. And I've done it for exporting to Japan is the main one we do, and I've imported from Starsky. Actually, I got my diamond python, and I had to go through the same thing. And the guy came out and he looked at it. He's like, "Oh my God, what are these things? They're the coolest thing." Oh my God, he's like, and I'm trying to think of what it is that he said. He's like, "Is this?" I think he said, "Is that a garter snake?" When he saw them, right? Because that's the only snake he knew, right? So like I don't want to say it, but realistically, I feel like you could literally send out or receive just about anything because chances are of you getting an some kind of a guide that actually knows what these animals are zilch to none. Like, how many
Yeah.
actual reptile guy do you know is a CBSA officer or whatever fish and wildlife guy, right? I'm sure there are some, but the
Yeah.
odds are that they're not.
Yeah, pretty slim. And
So
then what's the chances those very few individuals are getting calls from these other agencies like, hey, you want to ID all of these, whatever species it is, it's not going to happen. So it just, yeah, I've heard of a few of those guys being reptile people. I don't know to what extent, like they used to keep reptiles, so they were somewhat familiar with them, or they've been doing it long enough that they kind of know what they're looking at. And then you get the new kid on the block or the newer guys who just, it's a job to them. They don't really, doesn't matter to
Yeah,
them.
I think U.S. Fish and Wildlife's a bit more into the weeds of it because, like, when I tried to import the Bahamas up from the U.S., they wanted pictures and stuff, and like receipts on where they got the parents from and that, and because it doesn't all because I don't even think they had like as far back because like Bahama boas will live 14 years and then have a litter kind of thing, so it's hard to get information from 2 generations ago. So it's kind of tough to get everything from, especially when they're also all old keepers, right? And some of them either might not be around or they just didn't keep records of that stuff, right? So
Oh
it's
yeah,
tough.
yeah. No, it is.
the only thing I'd say though is the advantage though is of you talk of the magic portals and animals that just appear, right? So the most obvious portal that everybody talks about is the magic portal that goes through Germany, right? Germany seems
Yeah,
everything seems to appear in there. So when it appears in there, eventually it gets spread out a bit in Europe, it gets bred, and then for us to get it, it's pretty simple. Then once it comes into here, it comes with legal permits, and then all of a sudden these animals are legal, and then they're legally allowed to be bred and then moved around, right?
yeah,
So as much as I'm against what people do and
yeah,
bringing these stuff in, but once they're in here, then they get. If I import them, then I have that legal piece of paper that says I've done it, and then I could just keep breeding. Like all the pythons that I've imported, I have legal paperwork for them. So if I choose to move them around and propagate them, I can always refer back to, well, I got it here, I got it legally, I got these paperwork, and then all of a sudden, all my babies are legal and have a lineage that tracks that. Although I've heard, like you've heard, you brought up Nick. I've heard Nick talk about how like rough scales, or maybe it was Justin. He talks about how he got the paperwork, he imported them, he got them, he bred them, but then he couldn't send them back. And Fish and
yeah. It was,
Wildlife said
Western
that
instance.
was it
yeah,
that? So, and he
yeah,
said what, like, oh, well, we shouldn't have never issued those permits in the first place. So because we shouldn't have never, so I don't know. But again, that's with the states. You guys seem to have a funny way of making those work. So, but in
yeah,
Canada, I've never heard of those issues.
yeah. Yeah, the U.S. is just, it's getting to be such a pain in the butt to deal with some of that stuff because there's like, when Paul Harris produced those Gammon Flinder Range carpets and stuff like that, I immediately was like, God, I want a group of those. And I was like, I hit up Nick because I was like, Nick's usually the guy who works with Paul. This is when I heard that, oh, he does an import for him, and he, at least not anymore, because he just, I guess, moving a lot of the mutt stuff was just, he was just losing his desire to want to do that because he would do that for him because Paul would do a lot of mixed stuff. So, and he would only want to send, if he got good stuff to keep, he'd also want to send Nick a bunch of his designer carpet stuff. So he would, and then Nick, I think Nick just got tired of selling it because it's, I mean, especially even if you do it as a business, it's hard to sell something you're really not that passionate about. That's any new keeper I tell that to. I think it's silly to ask, what's something to get into, but if they ask, that's why I always say do something you like, because boy, it's a bitch to try to sell something you're not passionate about. You
Oh
know.
yeah.
I'd so I'm going to speak about that. I 100% agree. So I used to breed much more of the mutts and the designer and all that kind of stuff, and over time I've realized I really don't care when I hit that crazy weird triple species animal or triple locality animal or different things like that, and I'm like I just don't have interest for it, and I hate selling them, and I hate selling um, like the animals you don't hit on. They're even worse, right? And I've learned that I've kind of stopped doing all that. But the problem is for us here, there's only about three main peoples we can get Australian animals from: UK python, Philip Stark, what the heck, Starkey, whatever you want to, Star Python. I'll just go with that. Sorry about Philip if you're listening, and then Don Patterson. But those three people have gone very high designers in everything. So if you look at UK Python's animals, I'd say 90, maybe 80, 85% of his list is all crosses now. And it's really very big on that. If you Star Pythons has a lot of crosses, has some purity, and Don Patterson also is very big on um let's go with designer as well. So it makes it really hard because all of a sudden for us, there's not that many other people that we can get animals from that are not designers. And like I've I think I have one animal left that is considered a designer in my collection that would not be considered pure. And so for that reason, it makes it really hard because I basically can't get anything from anyone anymore. So it kind of sucks. But anyway, just going back to it is the main reason I stopped was I hate selling it. I didn't enjoy it, and it made me lose that passion. And I just kind of stopped it, and I sold off animals. Like I had snow, I had like snow carpets for like 7 or 8 years ago, and I just stopped the whole project because I just didn't have the passion for it. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm with you. That was the same thing I kind of went down the path of as because I am a ball python guy. I fell into that same trap. A lot of new ball python or well, snake people in general fall in when you get into it, especially my generation because I kind of came in right when Barchek really started getting onto the YouTube scene. So I got introduced to like the big breeder aspect of things, and I saw the pretty cool ball python stuff, and I got really attracted to that. And you end up getting ball pythons, but I always had interest in a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff. And then I start dabbling in Morelia. Well, you start dabbling in Morelia, and you see all these mixed morph stuff, and earlier on, I will say Nick always kind of inspired me. So I kind of was leaned more towards the pure stuff to begin with. But I was attracted to the morphs, a lot of the coastal morphs and stuff like that. But after a while, you mess with it and you're just like, I have ball pythons that aren't crosses. I can still do a bunch of weird stuff too and not make hybrids. And, carpets, I was like, I kind of just like working with like a pure southern coastal or a pure diamond or a pure inland or whatever it is. So I end up selling a lot of my coastal morphs. The only morphs I keep now is like zebras and jungles, and then the albino Darwins and stuff like that. And then some of the line bred stuff like ivories and the like striped stuff, different kinds of tiger lineage of carpets. Because I got like striped tiger or tiger Darwins, and working on trying to make more tiger looking jungles and stuff too.
Do you have
So
gelatins?
Yep. I got gelatins. I'm gonna try them again this year, hopefully. That was the one. That was a pair that I had that started combating with each other. They were just like they start doing the whole it's like male to male combat look and wrestling with each other. And then, like I said, a week later, they ended up breeding for a little bit, and it just nothing came from it. She was building big follicles, and then it was one of those whatever reason, the males just decided they weren't interested in breeding with her anymore. I had to have with so many different species where you see the female building big follicles, like she's right on the precipice of nearly ovulating, and none of the males want anything to do with it. I had this problem with Savu pythons and Maclots and a bunch of stuff. Ooh, that is nice.
His good buddy Shan has bred gelatins the last couple of years. He got them from Paul.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's a
Very.
nice striped one too.
Oh
I
yeah.
almost thought it was like some Xanthic tiger is what I thought it was at first.
Oh yeah.
That's how nice that stripe is. Oh wow.
Oh yeah. I think Shan has some like even better holdbacks from last year too.
I think I follow him. I think I've seen some of his stuff. Where is he in Canada? He's a
Wait,
Canadian guy.
I'll unmute
yeah,
Dominic.
close.
There you go, Dom.
Thank you. He's close to here, so yeah.
I follow. It's hard to keep track of some of the Canadian guys and the U.S. guys. Sometimes I mix us up, and I go, oh, another U.S. whatever carpet or Antaresia breeder, and I go, oh, he's in Canada. There was a dude actually and I can't. Michael, I don't know. He's a dude who does a lot of. He bred Southern White Lips, and
Oh
Michael
yeah,
Islam,
Aslam. Yeah.
he
Islam, whatever.
was he he had some of these really nice looking Eastern Stimsons where it was almost all splotched with like a
Oh
little bit
yeah.
of break in the background. And I was asking him, "Oh, do you still have this line?" And he goes, "Oh no, I sold it to someone in Japan and stuff." I go, "Son of a bitch."
Yeah.
So the
Like
ethers.
that was a couple of years ago. He had like 4 pairs, and then he sold them all because nobody was buying them. It's like,
Oh
oh,
man,
just keep a pair.
that
Stop.
sucks.
Yeah. Now he's getting
Yeah.
into. He's like a blood python guy now.
Oh, is he? Every once in a
Like
while
I
I
think
follow him.
yeah. I think Lisa just sent him some more white lips, but yeah, I think he's trying to get out of rings. He breeds Angolans every year, but yeah, he finally came to one reptile show because I live in Vancouver right now, and he lives around here too, and he finally did show up to a reptile show, and he kind of got to meet him a little bit, but yeah, he's an interesting guy.
So, I don't know if you guys saw what Lisa put in the comment there. She just said, I saw the video Adam Wickens posted about this import shipment. Does anyone in Canada work with GTPs? I thought of you, Don. Maybe you dodged a bullet. So, there are a few people that work with GTPs in Canada. I mean, Don Patterson breeds some pretty freaking cool GTPs. He's more designer. There is, I think, Dave Granby. I might get his name wrong.
Dave Grandy.
Just
Okay,
recently
there you
that
go,
was
Grandy.
talking to me. He was from
Yeah,
Canada. I wish I could remember his
yeah.
name, but he
He's
does a
got
lot of
some, yeah.
I don't remember.
Cody
I'm
Joe
not
as well.
Pure
Cody Joe.
stuff or not. You
So
guys do a lot
there's
of people with pures. Does a lot
Oh,
more.
Casey from Kelowna. He's from
yeah,
BC. He
Casey
just had his
Keith. Yeah,
first
he's
clutch
got
show.
a. I think he just did it too. So there's a couple of people that breed, and there's not that many big like that produce more than one clutch, but those are the few of the names. But so that import, I think we talked about it a bit on the last show. So um, I'm not 100% everybody got it from the same farm in Indonesia. I know the name of the
No,
farm, and I'm not gonna
it all came like they've said it
go for
all came from Chris's farm and that. So
okay.
yeah,
So, okay, if it's Chris, I know exactly the farm, I know the name, I know all the details on it, but I wasn't going to say it on the air. But if it is that farm, we'll call it Chris's farm, whatever that means. Um, those animals were sent to a lot of different people, a few different importers that spread them around. And from what I can tell, almost every single person's animals tested positive for Nido, and many of them have lost many animals. So I know of about four different people that got shipments in that have lost 50% to more of their animals and tested positive, including Adam Wickens. That being said, I don't know. I personally feel that if I would have had some, I think I would have definitely tried the heat treatment to get him back. But I don't know how good a GTP would do with high heat for, 2 weeks or so. So I'm not sure it would work or not. But she's saying, did you dodge a bullet? I mean, technically, all my animals who came in would have had Nido, but at least I would have spent money on animals, and I could have tried to make them live. But instead, I spent animals and money on animals, and I got nothing. So I feel like I would have rather have the bullet and given it a shot and have half my animals die or whatever. So I don't know. Did I dodge a bullet? Eh, I don't know. I guess so. And I'm going to say probably the biggest bullet is that I feel like. So this is a bit controversial, but maybe you can tell me what you think about it, William, after. But I personally think that anybody that's got a lot of pythons has Nido. I am willing to bet you that every single person's collection that has more than 5 animals probably has Nido in his collection. Why do we not see it? Why do you have no symptoms? It's because your husbandry is perfect. Animals are doing great. The concentration of the amount of, let's go with the RNA virus of the Nido is just so low that they don't test positive. And animals have learned to live with it, and they do really, really well. So my thought is everybody has it, but my fear of bringing new animals is then you could be bringing animals that has very high concentration that actually might have a different strain of Nido, right? You know how they talk about how
Yeah.
all these different strains of nidovirus that maybe a green tree you bring in directly from the farm that is captive bred or that's from the wild that has nido might be completely different strains that you have in your collection that everybody else has in their collection, right? So again, I'm not saying that my collection is filled with Nido. I'm just being realistic, man. I feel that everybody has it. I don't give a shit what people say. You may say you're Nido negative. I'm sure if I tested all my nice healthy animals, they're probably Nido negative. But I bet you if I put them in a box and stressed them out for 3 weeks and did all that, and then they started being sick, if I tested them, they might test positive. Who knows, right? But anyway, that's my thoughts. So did I dodge a bullet? Maybe, because I might have brought in something that would have had a different virus. But then again, my quarantine is not at my house. My quarantine's at Shan's place. So technically, I would have been fine. Shan's gonna listen to this and be like, asshole.
Oh man, yeah.
So what's your thought on that, William?
Oh man, I can go on a bit of a rant, I think, on the
Go for it. Thing. We're listening.
So I don't want to ever make it sound like it's not a thing. I'm sure I know it's wiped out a lot of collections, but I think when you look at the grand scheme of things, so who are the people with the most problems? The people that were into the hybrids, into the designers, into the crosses. And then the people who weren't known for crosses, what were they known for? Horrible quarantine. And you know what they probably did that I always think screws people, and you'll hear people say this. I have this ball python collection, but then I got a few miscellaneous stuff to take care of the rats that those ball pythons don't eat. Easy vector. That ball python doesn't eat it, but it might have struck at it, or it might have been drinking out of the water bowl that ball python or whatever is drinking, or whatever. It could be whatever python. But then you go, oh, I'm going to feed this to a different species. Well, now you just had that vector cross to a different species. So you can kind of see how either the hybrid people that had problems or the people with terrible quarantines, as far as either it was mites, feeding methods were terrible, something triggered it. And, I'm with you there. I think everyone has Nido. To what extent, who knows? But I've heard some of these companies aren't necessarily the best as far as they do. That's why it's so cheap. It's not the best test. If you wanted a real good reassuring test to do, you would spend $100 and have it done by Steve Tillis in his lab. I'm not trying to dig at different labs or anything, but he's foremost expert in that virus for a reason. I think he said in some tree vipers, they found like 7 different strains of Nido or Serpento viruses and stuff. For whatever reason, it seems like boreal animals tend to have higher not loads, but different species of nidovirus or Serpento virus. And that just led me to kind of think of all kinds of different scenarios. Is it ambush boreal snakes? Like do mambas have more strains than a viper that's more of an ambush predator? I don't know. The paper he did made me ask a lot more questions in my head of like, all right, what kind of a boreal snakes are we talking about? And it seems like with pythons, it seems like green pythons, carpet pythons, I'm sure scrub pythons too would probably have a higher or more different species for whatever reason. I couldn't even begin to tell you what reasons why they seem to have more variety of different species of Nido or Serpento virus compared to other stuff. But yeah, they find that they're finding Nido in boas. They're finding Nido in everything too. So it's not that I'm telling people don't worry about it, but just be wise and careful about it. Don't just throw in a new snake in your collection. Don't use the same feeding utensils for different species. Try to, if you can, at least groups of animals. If you can, I know you had Justin Julander. I still have the glass jar, but I need to get some of that alcohol. What was it, the 70%, and use as a dipping for the, because I used to put all my tongs in like just a glass thing of just used to be disinfectant, but if I get that jar again, I'd like to put that was it the 70.
Yeah, I think it's just the normal, like it sounded like it was like isopropyl alcohol and just dilute it in a little bit of water and kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to do. And then I've been hearing about the whole heat treatment thing, and I'm just like, I don't know. Yep. I need to get it. I'm such a lazy asshole when it comes to stuff like that. Like there's a bunch of stuff I need to get, and I'm just like, I put it off because I got so many different feeding utensils that I don't like. Not everything feeding utensils going to all these different species and stuff like that. So it's not something I worry about. And like I said, I put my pythons through a little, maybe not hell, but I put them through quite a bit of a temperature swings and long feeding periods. Male combat. I'll throw two males together to beat each other up for a little while if I have to. So they go through the gamut here. So yeah, I'm with you though. I think everyone has it. I think even the people that are quote Nido testers, I'm sure have it. It didn't trip a
Yeah.
PCR test.
They just don't have the really bad lethal
or
one either, right? Like,
or they're just lying. I think some people it's just their business. They're just trying to keep their business safe, so we're just going to lie about it. It's just easier to say no, I don't have it, or oh, I test.
I think you're 100% on it right there. So think about it though. Why would you ever say yes, I have Nido? Because as soon as you do
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
everybody's just like, I'm not buying from him. But I honestly think it's everywhere. So like it's what's the term, like a scarlet letter, right? You're just dooming yourself. If you have something that tests positive, and I mean, I've had people approach me like even regarding that treatment, treatment. What the heck am I talking about? That shipment. I've had people approach me and they're like, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "Well, the number one thing is you should have more thought about the why are you testing." And you need to know that question before you need to be able to answer that, right? So if you're going to test, why are you testing? And if you test, what are you going to do if you get a positive? Because all of a sudden that changes everything, right? Because let's say I test randomly 10 animals in my collection and two of them test positive. Now, what do? Am I taking those animals out of my collection? Am I euthanizing them? Am I now switching to a two room where one room is for my no positive, my one room is not? Does it change anything? Do I leave it as is and just clean my hands around? Like, there's all these things where you got to decide, like, what do I do? Because if I'm just, especially people that randomly test your animals. So if you're, let's say I go to William's house, I'm going to say, I'm going to do 20 tests on random animals. And then two of them test positive, but they're not sick. They're doing great. Let's say they've bred for you or they're in the lineup to breed this year. Are you going to put a male with that female? Even if that male has been with that female now every year for the past 4 years and you've produced clutches, right? So this is where the why are you testing? And if you're testing, what are you going to do with the results, right? So if I'm looking at my collection, why would I test? And I'll say it flat out. I don't think I would test. Why would I? Nothing's sick. Everything's healthy. Things are breeding. I don't really sell adults or anything bigger. I sell all my neonates and only neonates. And neonates technically are all nido free because it doesn't pass through the egg barrier. And those animals, the eggs are kept away from the female for 55 days in an incubator, right? So I think they're all things you got to take into account and make a decision for yourself as to what you do with it. And just like you, right? I stopped feeding. I bring down to about 62, 64 in my room. I stress the shit out of my animals every single winter, right? So, but I think with the high heat, it's enough to keep them healthy and to prevent it, or maybe not, right? And so I don't know, and maybe that's what weeds out the animals that are sick. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just another rant, just like you, man. Like it's one of those things that is.
It's kind of like
ahead.
that boogie. It's like that boogeyman situation in the hobby where people like they'll a few louder names or people that with bigger voices will say something about it, and now everyone's afraid of it. Or you're a terrible person if you don't do this or that. And I'm not gonna pick on anyone who does test regularly. If you can do it and you want to do it, that's your prerogative. But like, not all of us can do it. And frankly, I'd love to see you put a probe in a 8-foot rock python mouth or a Sri Lankan python mouth and hope you don't get fucked up or even hurt the snake. I think someone would literally, just a blood python. Can you imagine putting a swab in a big female blood python that doesn't want you touching it or restraining it? Oh, that'd be hellacious. That would be, that'd just be terrible. I couldn't even fathom doing something like that. So, and it's like I said, if you want to do it, like, and I'm not opposed to doing it. I would do it like if I got it from, I don't know, like I quarantine a long time too. Like I literally, like some stuff I'll quarantine till some up to a year or sometimes even longer. Sometimes I just keep them in quarantine until they grow out of the tub, like, and that could take a while because I cycle feed quarantine stuff too. So they get put through the gamut right from the get go. They'll get maybe not as they get fed less in quarantine because I'm not trying to put more size on them unless they're like a smaller species. I can hold, it's a bitch to quarantine big pythons because they just like grow so quick. So I got to keep bigger tubs for them and stuff for them. But a lot of the smaller stuff, like shit, a pygmy python, I could keep in a quarantine V18 tub almost its entire life, and it's like, yeah, just so I just quarantined for a long time, and if like maybe if I got it from a source that was less than reputable, I might be persuaded to do it. But more often than not, I just quarantine long enough to where if something seems weird about that animal, then a lot of times I'll, take preventatives, whether it's testing for something. But, a lot of people get so caught up in this fear of nidovirus. I'm just like, dude, it's just the new boogeyman. I mean, there'll be another new boogeyman that comes out that'll scare us all again. So, IBD, remember, I'm sure you remember that, Dom, from back in the day. I mean, if Boa looked at you funny, that sucker was in the freezer or getting put down or whatever it was. So,
I
yeah,
think he just called me old.
I'm just saying, you've been around a long time. You know what I'm talking about. That was like the big boogeyman. I remember I was just starting to get into the hobby when it was still like, it was still a thing people would talk. I mean, I remember hearing people, they said they were so scared of it, they were putting their animals in their garage, and that's how they were able to breed some like white lips and some of their more obscure pythons because they were like terrified because they thought it was it was clicking or something, so they would just put it into or their garage, quarantine it away, and then they end up breeding it and stuff. So I was like, okay, if that works.
My
So
biggest fear back then was that was one of the reasons why I tried to not keep any boas in my collection was because IBD was let's be honest, it was much more of a boa thing, right? So it was just a fear of keeping, and when IBD would move over to pythons, it would tend to kill everything. So I always feared keeping boas with pythons because of that. But again, back then, like there wasn't much known, right? Like you think vets, it's rough to get a good vet or get a vet that actually knows about snakes or shit like that. Like in the 90s, there was no, like they didn't know shit about it. Like you would go there and they'd be like, "What is that?" So
especially Canada, I can't because you guys are more rural than we are. I bet it was even worse for you. You know,
there was no one.
Yeah,
There
there's
was
no. I don't think we actually maybe in Ontario, but I don't think there's actually like a technically a reptile specialist vet here
Yeah, it's
anymore.
probably just a hobby guy or someone who does it as a hobby. I know a lot of vets that'll do that. They do mainly mammals, and then reptiles is just like kind of a hobby thing for friends that
Yeah.
might need it or something.
Although
So
Alberta's weird. Alberta has like two, three, four vet clinics for such like a they have like a weirdly like high proportion of reptile keepers to like a normal population. Like here in Vancouver, like you think it'd be way higher, but no, like it's not as high. And there's probably two or three vet clinics here that do it, but you think it'd be more, and they should kind of know more. There's one major vet down here that does like he deals with the SPCA and he deals with the provincial government when there's seizures and stuff, but he's not even a reptile specialty guy.
yeah, I got an old school vet down here. He was like he looked at like he remembers like the arena virus and stuff like that, IBD. He knew about that, but then when I said, I guess go ahead and test for Nido, when I had a blackhead python crash on me and just went to shit, and I was just like, I got a full panel done on it, just necropsy and all that, and he's like, well, Nido what? And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I guess you just know what you remember 15 or 20 years ago, and that's where it just stopped as far as what he looked into. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I think with some of this though too is that like even if they're captive bred in Indo, like it's no, but like them being captive bred in Indo doesn't. It's like no different than them being captive bred in North America in terms of they still like it could be captive bred here, captive bred there, even wild caught, which it shouldn't be because I think it's illegal to sell and collect wild green trees legally. It is.
yeah,
You're not like people saying that they have wild caught stuff. Technically, like you could probably get in big trouble theoretically. Like they should be captive bred. So
should
there is
be,
that too.
should be,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the key should as to whether it is or not. See, for
yeah,
so for my vet, When I worked at the zoo for 10 years, during the 10 years, it was the same vet that did all the animals for the entire zoo. So there was over, 4 or 5 thousand animals there. So he did everything from amputations on crocodiles to every single thing for snakes forever. Then that vet, after that, I'm still seeing him now, which I've been away from the zoo for 21 years because I've been a medic for 21 years. So you look at that. So that guy's been doing it for over 30 years and has seen more reptiles than I can even imagine. Now, as to whether he's got the accreditation of like that extra year, I think you need one extra year to be an exotic vet. I'm not, honestly, I don't even know. So maybe I'll shut up there because I'm talking out of my ass. But you need that extra accreditation. I don't know if he's got it or not, but I trust him because he's done so many and he's seen so many animals that you feel like he knows. Like when you take out the animal, he's handling it, he's doing everything, he's checking. It's obvious they know what they're doing. But I feel like I see the posts all the time in my city, like, hey, which vet should I go to? And people recommend this one, and all I'm thinking is all they see is a bearded dragon, a leopard gecko, and a ball python. That's
Yeah.
literally all they're seeing, and they just do it to get that $230 for your visit, and I feel like you're just wasting your money away.
Yeah, it's good that if you can get a good relationship with a vet, like my vet, he might be old school, but he's a really good guy and he's easy to talk to. And I mean, dude, he'll talk you over the phone. He's like, man, you just come talk to me or text me, and I can give you either dosage you need, or if you need antibiotics for something, just message me, and you don't have to go through the hassle of actually, because on top of it, I would have to drive like 50, 55 minutes to go to the vet in the busy city. And I'm just like, oh, this is such a pain in the ass, to get up here before it go drive backwards for my day job to the facility, grab the snake, go up there. Now it's kind of more like, all right, he can come out and do a vet visit rather than me having to go out there to, bring one or so animals out there to like, it's usually reproduction problems. If I have issues, it's like, retained egg or, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's not fun when you gotta deal with that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think with some of this too, though, like obviously, come full circle here. The original, like where these animals came from. Chris is doing all he can to make right, which is exactly, and he's not intentionally trying to send all these animals with Nido. It sounds like there's just a way they prep the animals to go that maybe one of the animals actually had it, and then it kind of spread to the rest of them, or who knows how it is, right? Like I don't even think Chris himself is like the snake guy there, right? He has his monitor stuff. He's helping with what, like, we've all listened to his podcasts of, because he's on Trap Talk and that, like William's on Trap Talk with Dave and
So,
Junior.
question: was this Nido thing? I hope I'm not like putting anything out there that shouldn't be. Was it Chris's imports? I guess
Yeah,
I heard
believe
about it.
I think
didn't look into it,
MJ said it on the podcast, I believe, and yeah, it's kind of known that that's where the import came from. But he's doing all right, because they did make a post too to reach out, like if you're in the order and you didn't know about it, just reach out, kind of thing.
Yeah, he has cool shit
Yeah.
in that farm, man.
Oh yeah.
Unless something's like clearly there's something
And
wrong with this snake.
which is why I also say they are captive bred. Like
Yeah.
he's not gonna send wild caught
He
stuff.
has some really cool stuff there. I mean, shoot, he has like a group of Kofiaus, pure Kofiaus
Exactly.
and stuff. And I'm like, he's damn right. Granted, though, I'm sure there's still an arm and a leg through him, or even they go
Oh
through.
yeah, I saw the list price. It
Oh, they're
was
still
pretty close
stupid.
to as if you're buying U.S. captive bred stuff.
Oh, that's dumb. I'm sorry.
They were
That's just me
pretty
being
high.
yeah.
Mike, we'll talk after because I'm not gonna say it on the air, but I finally got the prices from directly from the farm, and it's not an arm and a leg, man. We'll
Okay,
talk
that's
about
good.
it after.
Yeah.
Because I want to get some tandem bars too. I'd love to get the tandem
Oh,
bars.
yeah.
I was trying to get those years ago. Whenever oh, what is his face? Chris and Dave were producing. I think his name's Dave or David or something. The
Yeah.
guy, they were the scrub
Totally.
guys before Steve was, and they were producing quite a few tandem bars. And I try to get some, especially the pattern ones, man. I don't. Is anything I didn't really care about. I really don't like patternless. I'd rather just work with a liasis species if I'm going to work with something that's patternless. But um, he was making pattern tandem bars, and I'm just like, oh man, those are so. I've always wanted to work with those. And I'd never. He would be like, "Oh, you're on the list. I'll put you on the list," and then nothing happened, or I would hear nothing, and then Dave back in the day, I remember I think he was breeding the. I don't remember. I thought it was Dave breeding most of the scrubs, but he was always wishy washy. Like he would get into to them, get out of them, get into them, and stuff like that. And then he ended up getting out permanently, I guess, or for the foreseeable future. And now they kind of disappeared to the hobby. And then I guess the one dude who was collecting them from Tandem Bar ended up retiring or quitting or something. So he doesn't. There's no one getting or collecting them. So a lot of it's having to be bred at a farm or something like that. Which I saw. He was producing some over there at his farm, or I think he was. I thought I saw clutches of them.
Yeah. Well, they can also buy from other farms, I believe, too. Like if somebody else is breeding them, right? Depending on the quota, they can they because if they overproduce tree monitors, and they fill their quota or however that works, they're gonna have to sell them to somebody else for their shipment kind of thing, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Scrub's big up there in Canada. Oh, sorry.
Does Eric? One question before that. Does Eric Hernandez have tannin bars? I think Lisa would know. She's in the chat. Because I think Eric bred one. Maybe it was tannin bars, or maybe it was the other. Nada, or is that?
Are you talking about Canada right now? Who's bred?
No, I'm referring to the U.S. right now because you were wanting
Eric.
some. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not selling them. He's just kind of either keeping them all back or selling them to like Lisa and stuff like that. And
well, you should just hit him up.
Yeah, I guess I could, but dude, the problem with the scrub stuff, man, and I hate to sound like either you're really old when it comes to the hobby, but I do remember when scrubs were so cheap that I understand higher prices, but dude, when you start talking $3,000 or $4,000 for a scrub python that I remember was like 10 times less than, well, even less than that. We weren't even a fraction of that at one point in time.
It was a throwaway giveaway pet.
Oh, dude, I remember, like a lot of your Southerns, Barnecks, Northerns, all of them were like, I mean, 100, $150. Even Tandem bars were like 100, $150. Some your Moluccans and stuff was like $250, and then like Halmaheras were, I mean, if you can get them to live, they were, I mean, dirt cheap too, or weren't very expensive. So
I think Halmaheras may be legal here if you read the fine print of our laws, because they were made in 2009 and everything is under Morelia, even the Somalia stuff.
Oh.
And Tracier is not on that list. It just says Amethystina and Moluccans, I'm pretty sure, and maybe King Horneye as well, right? But it doesn't have Tracier.
Right.
So going back to the scrub talk, so I honestly, it might be my ignorance, but I don't really know of anybody that has successfully bred any types of scrub.
There is one guy in Quebec, I believe.
Okay,
is it Lawrence or something?
Okay, and he's bred once or he's bred multiple times?
I have no idea. I think I've either seen a post or something in the past.
Even
if
somebody
mentioned
one,
something.
There's almost none, right? So
was Don breeding them back in the day? I never heard of him breeding them, but I didn't know him like that. So.
I wouldn't know. We probably would have to ask him, but
early 2000s.
If you looked in the past decade, maybe there's been one clutch from the Lawrence guy, right? Like basically, as far as I know, not really anybody are really actively breeding them, or there's no babies around. So the only even that, I don't even know if anybody's imported any from the States. So there might be. There's probably a few of them, but I don't know if anybody's bred them
either. Cody's another big Canada python guy, so I figured he'd be working with them.
But I
know he can't in Alberta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they have the same laws that we do.
Yeah, he's done Papuans a couple of times now, Papuan pythons, so which is pretty freaking cool. He's got some that guy is. It's pretty impressive. We did a show with him, but that show didn't work, right? Did we lose the
No, the audio was weird. Actually, for some reason, it has your thing still doing the circle, it uploaded, but then it's it's processing still.
Yeah, we did a show with them and lost it.
Yeah, I got it full, I got it working, and then for some reason I released it and it was all fucked up and the timing was off. So, and then when I went back to see if I could at least use the shortened version, the original one, it like didn't work either, and like it somehow like reverted back to some other stage of like the uploading, which is weird. So I can't even like we're gonna have to redo that episode eventually because yeah. Cody, that was like it was a fantastic conversation that nobody gets to hear.
So, like, do you see a rise in popularity in scrubs up there, or is it still no one really seems to care? I know your guys' market isn't
So
huge to begin with, but
to give you an idea, like I bought a pair of scrubs with Shan. We have a pair of Maruki patternless exotic scrubs. They're probably around, I don't know, man, like 8 feet, maybe 9 feet, but they're like skinny. Like they're this little long, really long twigs. Long term well, I guess they've been in captivity now for about 2 years. So, um, will we manage to breed them? No idea. But they're cool. But how many scrubs would I want? Because the problem is, even if you were to breed them, who the heck would I sell them to? I don't even know if there's a market here. Because there's
right, right,
like so there might
It'd just
be,
be Ontario and Manitoba basically.
but it makes you wonder, like how many, like if one person was really good at it, I think one clutch would saturate the whole market.
right.
Because I don't know how many people would, or you would. I guess you could probably sell them overseas or export them out. But I think they're really cool. But like, how many? Like, I couldn't. I don't know. I don't think a Kush could like live here and have all these
Yeah, me
clutches
too.
and not know where to go. Right? Like, so
Yeah,
I'm.
I was always curious because I was just like I noticed in the U.S. because primarily Kush, they've never the Somalia in general has never had the spotlight as it has right now. Other than Boland's pythons were the only exceptions that always had a spotlight because they were like the like green pythons or diamond pythons that were a pinnacle species in that genus. But the rest of the complex, no one could give two shits about for the longest time. And then Kush started doing his videos and getting more well known through Trap Talk, and I've noticed a huge resurgence in a lot of the scrubs here. I always I can respect it, but I would even tell Kush this. I go, dude, you got to be careful with the scrubs because they're still a big snake, even if they're slender. The U.S. government's not going to look at them as like, oh, they're just slender. They're going to look, oh, 12 feet long. Yeah, that's still in the chopping block. I always like that Eugene quote is, big snake, little market, little snake, big market. And he's doing it for a living, so I think it's something to seriously take in consideration. Now
Yeah.
tandem bars, I'm sure can, but I think most people, they think scrub pythons. They don't think small scrubs, big scrubs. They just lump them all together. Unless you're the black Boland python, that's the only one that gets sometimes separated from the group.
Yeah.
So,
But like here, they still ban Boland's pythons here, which sucks because
oh,
BC would honestly
really?
be a good place to breed Bolands because we have so many like mountain areas kind of thing, or we're close to sea level. I remember how some people used to think that like, oh, maybe you need to live in like Colorado to breed Boland's pythons or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, there's a few in Ontario that have Bolins. I've
Oh,
like when we were
there's
at
a
the show,
couple
there's
in Alberta too, I
yeah,
think.
they're out there, and I just want to address a couple of things in the comments. So first of all, Don, I think Michael, you're pretty good friends with Don. You know him pretty well. I'm
No,
pretty good
I
friends.
haven't.
Oh
I don't
no,
talk to Don.
okay. I talk to Don on the phone quite often, and sometimes we'll chat for a long while. I am trying to get him on. I would love to get him on. Don
You need
hasn't
to.
been. He
I haven't
hasn't
heard him in
been.
a long
He
time since
hasn't been on a
NPRs.
podcast in a really long time, and I'm working on him. Um, I don't
Why
know
won't
if
he
he'll
show
ever
his
come
face
back on.
though?
But it's like the UK.
We
There's
can just
tons
shut
of
off the
people.
camera. It's fine.
Yeah.
Well, why would he show his face?
Nobody knows what he looks. Well, actually, some people do, but
I have some
I've
friends
never.
that sell stuff to him and
Yeah.
whatnot,
I've
so
never
they
seen
get
his
to see
face.
him.
I have no idea. I've always joked like maybe he's Asian, maybe he's this, maybe he's that, but apparently he's just some regular white guy. So I have no idea. I've never met him.
Dave
But I
Dave
talk to
told
him a
me.
lot.
Was it Dave Levinson was telling me, he's like, what, were you in a horrible car accident? You don't want to show a disfigured face or whatever it is? And oh no, that's what Don was telling. I guess some people were saying is they thought he had a disfigured face from horrible accident that happened or something. And I'm just like, yeah, that's interesting. I've never seen your face, but I've heard of Don's reptile
Greg's been to his
radio days.
collection.
Oh
Greg
man,
back 10 years ago. Greg was coming to some show
So
out here and
I
went
think
and saw
one
it.
day we'll get him on. It just might be, well. There's a couple of people that doesn't want that just don't want to be on, right? But Don, if you look at old podcasts, he's on a lot of podcasts, like
He's a very
maybe
good, like he's a
eight,
good
nine.
communicator too.
Yeah,
Like he's not like a real quiet, like some of those old school
yeah,
guys who don't want to say shit, don't talk, and you're just like it's really having to like pry the bear to get him to
yeah.
say something. Don was a really good like he would chit chat for hours and stuff. I remember him from Reptile Radio days. Like I remember Don from a long time ago. He was one of the Canadian heroes I looked up to from back then. For all this weird
Yeah.
Python stuff.
He's
And
read
he's
some cool
very
stuff the
respected
last
here.
couple of years too.
Yeah, he's very respected here. I just think it'd be cool to have him back. And there's a couple of those people that just, I don't know why, they just don't want to come back and chat, right? And he was on before, but there's other people like Nick did one podcast with Paul, right? UK Python. And
Yeah,
he's
he's
got
another one.
3 hours of him, but it never aired. It's never like there's none of his stuff. I'd love to be able to talk to him, but I'm asking and I'm trying, and it's just like he's like, oh,
Right.
maybe Starsky
Maybe
would
we
be a
get
nice one.
Starkey.
Starsky said he's gonna come on.
We could get
Um,
Wooter too. Would be fun.
oh yeah, that's true. Like there's a lot of those people like that. I just think would be really great to have. But and going back to Cody Joe, 100%, we're gonna redo Cody Joe. We're just waiting a bit of time, and we'll try again. Cody's just got to get better internet. Cody, if you're listening, fix that shit so we can have you back on and not
Right.
not be able and actually be able to put it on.
So like the
You're
few
you're
times
muted, Mike.
Yeah. Maybe he just needs to find the best Wi-Fi hotspot area in his shop and then just not move.
Yeah, that's like whenever we would do podcasts, we would like I have a few. I'm in Missouri. I'm like slab dab in the middle of the U.S. And we have a few big names like Jeff Hartwig was a guy who he was the first in the U.S. to breed albino olive pythons and stuff. And he was in the Olympics for pole vaulting, and so he got to travel the world, and he got to put his hands on the first captive or not. It was the first wild collected rough scale python in Australia. And I'm like, dude, that is an all. He was telling me for like 30 minutes or 20, 30 minutes of just that story. And I'm like, dude, that's cooler than 90% of the new people you hear on these podcasts. I go, why don't you want to get on the pod? And I'm slowly putting it in his head, like, and then we have another old school guy who also is named Jeff. We call him Little Jeff, and he's been doing it just as long and has like bred all these different species of pythons and boas and colubrids and stuff. And they just like, yeah, they're like what you guys said. They don't care. They just do it because they enjoy it. They don't care if they don't want to talk or they don't. I think a lot of it's a fear of being backed into a corner, like with a story, and they're afraid that they don't want to get put in a situation. And I'm just like, that's why a lot of these shows, if you talk to them preemptively and say, what do you not want to talk about? Because we would ask a lot of guests in the beginning, especially old school guests, like, what do you not want us to touch at all? Like as far as conversation or whatever. And we never, you know, just leave it
Oh
at
yeah,
that. And maybe
yeah.
behind the scenes, we might talk, about that stuff, but, and hope the light's not on. So it's like, oh, live recording or anything. But yeah, no.
So, William, what pythons have you bred? Do you have a list of all the different species you've bred, and then maybe tell me the two or three that you're really passionate about? Let's go down one of them, and after that, so what have you bred, python wise, and what are your top species?
Okay, so I've bred obviously ball pythons, Angolans, Sumatran shorttails. What else? Cheney, variegata. I had a clutch of inlands, but I fucked the clutch up, and the eggs ended up going bad because I underestimated how bad gnats could be in a clutch and how they could decimate a clutch. And boy, that was a so I hoping to I should have another chance at because I got a decent little group of inlands. Uh, what else? White lips, the northern white lips. I bred them. Ring pythons, wheat belt Stimson or western Stimsons, easterns, spotteds, pygmies. I feel like trying to think different localities of carpets like Brockhamptons. I've bred. I've gotten clutches from Southern Coastals, but I haven't been able to go the distance because I've had a bunch of like random issues like heating issues and stuff like that with them. But Max, Waters, I bred them. I think that's it. I think. And then as far as my favorite species, that one's really hard because I like a lot of different stuff for a lot of different reasons. Like it's either their personality, the way they look, their sometimes a story, man. Sometimes the story behind some of these things are just so cool, man. As far as like how they got into the hobby, um, who collected them, the trials and tribulations they went to get to them. Sometimes their natural histories is super interesting to me because I'm like Nick. I like, he has a larger spectrum of their natural history than I do. But for whatever I can piece together on my own with my, redneck research I can do, I find it really interesting some of the history of some of these animals. And so, man, ring pythons are probably my favorite species. I don't know what it is about them. I think as a kid, I always thought they were cool. Even like,
They're almost a colubrid.
well, it's one of those things where it's like, you get that same old, oh, they're cool as babies, but it's a shame they don't look like that as adults. That is like the one thing that ring pythons get dubbed with the worst as far as like, it's like the hoodwink situation. You buy this baby and it ends up being a duller, different looking snake as an adult. And I'm just like, I still think they're cool, man. They should be a small python. They're not a big python like most people would anticipate. Mine aren't much bigger than my spotted pythons, my females. My males are smaller than my breeding female Antaresia. They can be pretty small, or they should be pretty small. I think the problem is most people just don't keep them very small. So
All right.
that's probably my favorite as far as just a species goes. But like then there's different species I end up liking more because I got them. Angolans were one. I know you don't, but handling them I just like. They just were intriguing to handle. I don't know what. I just thought they were cool. Uh
So I just gotta say, I actually think Angolans are really cool. They are a really cool species.
yeah.
I've kept them for like 7 or 8 years. I've bred them 2 years in a row. I just grew tired of them. I just, you know how some animals you get, you're like, they're cool. I did it a couple times, but I love so many other things more than them
Yeah.
that, you know what? I only have so much room and I'd rather have something else in there.
Oh
That's
yeah.
how I'm gonna say it. So there's
Hey, I get it. I know people like that. That is, I mean, I was helping people. I helped this one guy, Kyle, a buddy of mine, with breeding or northerns. Like gave him like what I did, and he had success this year. And he told me oh man, I hope he doesn't. This isn't terrible, but he was like, he goes, I had this guy asking about information on breeding and all that, and he's like, I don't know if I should like just freely just give information like this out. And I go, this is the way I look at it, dude. They're a patternless snake, and the problem with a lot of those patternless snakes and just species without morphs, sometimes they have trouble keeping long-term interest because once you've bred them a few times, you're not like changing anything, making anything new. That's what makes morph breeding so attractive to a lot of people is because you're always can usually make something different or new. But with a lot of these species like white lips, waters, Macs are still pretty variable, but like stuff, a lot of your pattern and olives, stuff like that, you're just making a patternless snake, or some stuff that does have a little variation. You may not be changing all that much, and it just gets kind of like, well, I've done this, and like you said, sometimes there's other stuff you want to make room for to try to breed and experience something different because there's a lot of reptiles out there, and there's only so much room in a building or room that you can devote to some of that stuff. So yeah, that's I totally get that, and I tell people all the time. That's why I don't. If someone breeds it, who says they're going to want to breed it for? Because people are so worried about market stuff. And I said the only people I would ever be worried about is whenever they want to produce like 15 or 20 clutches, or maybe even less than that, 8 to 12 clutches of a species, like a white lip or a ring. Because then there's only so many people that are going to be even in the U.S. would only be interested in so many of those animals, and that's when a lot of times our market in particular just go right to the shitter. Is when people want to, they get a wild hair up their ass because they produced one clutch, sold them all for exactly what they wanted, didn't get jewed down, didn't have any issues whatsoever, but then they go, okay, so now I'm just going to make 3 or 5 more clutches. Well, then they have like 100 or 150 of those animals. Now they're sitting on like over like 75% of them because now market just went to the shitter because now they don't have enough people interested in them. And, it's kind of one of those, like, I remember hearing Ryan talk about this, and I 100% agree is, this hobby's, it gets so hyped up, like certain species you'll see just get hyped up to this outrageous, just grand, like ball pythons were for years. People like, you want to make $1 million, you want to live like this big breeder, you got to breed ball pythons. Or, in recent years, it was like the Superdorf retic stuff was super big, and at least in the U.S., it just blew up. People wanted these small retics, and you know, it was
And then
sold
they
this great.
hybridize them all with
Yeah,
mainlands.
well, God, I could get on such a rant with the Superdorf stuff, man. But
I want,
anyways, it was
yeah.
them, and then there was I hate to say it, but I think green tree pythons are going to fall under that same thing. And people go, well, they're hard to breed. Well, you get enough people doing it, they'll. I'm guaranteed they're not impossible to breed. That's all I'm going to say. So, you get a number of people willing to put an effort into it. You best believe they'll start doing it. So
Yeah, for sure. Some stuff's just cool though, right? Like the Bolins, like just breeding
yeah,
Bolin, like
but
what's it,
even
Sam breeding
Bolins,
Bolins, like they're just freaking, that's just cool.
Bolins will hit that same thing. They're
Yeah,
$10,000 now, but realistically, how many people can afford that? And then how many of those can you house in your house or building till you run out of cage space to keep all those adult Bolins pythons that you refuse to sell because you just wanted that 10 grand or whatever for. And yeah, I just that goes for all the scrubs. Moluccans are another one that are people asking that outrageous money for, and I'm just like, well, you just keep them all, and then whenever you have trouble, because you get them to 12 foot long, and then they take 8 foot cages, and then you're like, oh shit, I'm out of room, and stuff like that. Then you're having to just trade them or do whatever it is. That I think the problem that gets people in trouble is when they think their quote market is untouchable. When you start
That's
thinking that, you're setting yourself up for doom.
so. Let me so excluding the Bolins because I think they're a big snake and that changes things. Take a species like rough scale pythons. If you look at rough scales in the states or even in Canada, they had a ridiculous price, right, when they started. And rough scales aren't necessarily that hard to breed, right? I really, you look at Australia, right? Australia, it's the most common, one of the most common pythons out there as a pet species, and they talk about it. I hear every now and then they're like a $50 snake, right? That you can pick up at the shows. They're
Right.
just a dime a dozen. I
Right.
think the rough scales will have the same thing in the states in a while, and the same thing here eventually. Right now, they still got a nice price tag. Like I think in the states, I hear what like 1,200, 1,400, 1,500. I'm not quite sure, but whatever that price is, that was way higher before. But wait until in the states they produce 15 clutches a year, 20 clutches a
Yeah.
year, right? Eventually, it'll get there. That's gonna turn into a $400 snake eventually. It's
Yeah.
gonna keep going down and down. So I think like everything, um, those animals will come down. But see, you're talking about like the same typical snake. You breed a rough scale, you get rough scales, and your babies look like your adults, and they look always the same, right? But the story behind the rough scale is so cool
Oh
that it
yeah.
makes you want to keep breeding them, right? So I think
Yeah.
that one's one of those ones
Exactly.
that, like the story you were saying, is actually causing that.
Yeah. So that I'm with you too. Like you saw it with ring pythons. I mean, back in the '90s and early 2000s, they were like dirt snakes for a little while because you had
but
like
Rob,
you.
I'll just interject a little bit. Rob Stone uh, mentioned though that the reason they were so cheap wasn't actually because people were breeding them,
They were
it's
importing
because of
and breeding them at the same time.
the blind smuggler guy.
Yep. No, that was yep. Exactly. Exactly. No, I was just getting ready to reference that too. It was like a mixture of the. I think it was probably more smuggling and a little bit of breeding. So yeah, I know I'm with you. It was just kind of it was like this trifecta. So then you had like these dirt cheap ring pythons. Well, no one cared about them. They didn't disappear, but only the few that actually liked them kept them going for a while. Like Keoghan here or Don in your guys' area, and kept a group going. And now there's this resurgence. White lips faced that too for a while. They were just the iridescent snake people wanted that were cheaper than bowling. So we'll just deal with those, and so because we can't afford bowling eyes, so they would get them, and there was like then they realized like, oh man, these are a little bit hellacious to deal with, and they're just like, oh, I don't know if I want to deal with this anymore. So that's why like I don't like the hype behind stuff. I like an organic growth or organic interest, because I don't want people to get something and just be like, well, this isn't what I thought it was. Like, some species definitely get to be, so.
Do you think Angolans were more like that? I feel like they were kind of. You would see Dawn or somebody post them, and then you'd slowly see other people get them, and their prices kind of held.
I remember back in the day, like whenever like BPI had that article on them, and you'd read it, and they were just like, there was a few species that kept herpetoculture, like boa and python, people's interest. They would list like Cropani, or what was another one? They like those pinnacle species. Rough scales at the time were up there, but they were like these pinnacle pythons and boas that people wished to work with. And Angolans were one of them. And then eventually, when the zoos got that group in originally, and the U.S. keepers ended up getting some, it built this huge, like, oh my God, this new species. It was kind of like the morph thing, like where like there would be a new morph in ball pythons. It'd be like $10,000, regardless if it was actually cool or not. And then that same thing happened with species too. I mean, there was like a new species came in. It was like, oh, this big new thing, and that we only saw in books or something or heard about, and now we actually get the opportunity to work with and see it in person. So it kind of builds like this immediate hype around something, and then it's kind of up to the individual if that hype lives up to their expectations, and that's all individual based. I try to some people like, when it comes to the big snakes, it's like some people like the active retic more. Some people like more of the sluggish, easygoing Burmese python personality. So back on the species thing too, that was a species I didn't realize I'd like as much until I start working with it. Was Burmese python, Bivitatis, because I work with Proxi too. They're horrible, but the at least the ones I work with are horrible. But the Bivitatis, the big ones, those guys are. I mean, I can kind of see why there was a little bit of like their interest, because they're that big kind of puppy dog. As long as you don't smell like rodents or rabbits or something that could be eaten, they were always super easy going, and I trusted them always more than I trust the retics. There was always something about retics that made me a little more hesitant to trust them, you know. So, and then olive pythons were another species I didn't think I'd like as much, there until I got them, and I was like, these are actually cooler than I thought. So there was a few species like I would get because I was like, I'll give it a shot, and then I ended up liking them way more than I thought I would. And then there were species I just remember as a kid. Carpet pythons were another one. I'm 33. In my generation, we grew up watching like Steve Irwin. So when you saw Steve getting bit in the face with that coastal, and you're just like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. And then that's what got me interested. I remember some of my first reptile shows. I remember after I got like a ball python and a variable king, I was like, I want a carpet python, because I was like, there was that was like childhood memory brought into real life when I was actually at a show, and but at the time you only knew a carpet python. You didn't realize there was a whole complex, or at least I didn't at the time. So yeah, so I don't know. There's all kinds of different species I like for numerous different reasons. You know.
So a couple things. First, I'm gonna go. Lisa's bringing up all these different things, which I think are going to be interesting conversations. So number one, I know you're not the biggest GTP guy, but how do you feel about the GTP bubble? How do you feel about the whole designers being worth more than pure species and all that? I'm just curious on your thought on that, because I know where I stand, but I'd love to hear your thought. And after that, I don't know, Michael, if you feel like it, but I think it'd be cool to go into the how did you breed your brings? If we could spend like 15 minutes on that a bit after. I think the ring python would be a cool conversation, since it's a species you really like. But before, GTPs, Mike, what's your thought on the bubble? What's your thought on the designer, on all that thing about, and I think your sentiment is close to mine, but I'm giving you a chance to rant on here, and
Okay.
let's see
So
it.
with the
Yellow
GTPs,
Neo.
I would say with the green python stuff, you know, I try to keep an open mind with the hybrid stuff. I try to be as lean. I'm not like Nick, and Nick I consider a real inspiration to me, especially early on in her pediculture. But you guys know how Nick is. He will tear a hybrid guy. I mean, he could talk to Bill Siegel, and give him shit and tell him that that's just stupid what you're doing and not even bat an eye. I'm a little more kind than that. I don't want to belittle people, but I think in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the hybrid stuff in general, what ends up happening is, dude, and I tell people all the time, I go, look at your green pythons, and they only want to look at their green pythons, and they only look at that market or only look at that part of the industry, and that's all they have. And that's what gets ball python in trouble, retic people in trouble. It gets all these different species keepers in trouble because they so narrow minded in one group. And what ends up happening is something happens, something like the Lasiac with the big snakes, right? When we used to be able to get imports of all these different retics, berms, rocks, stuff like that, and we didn't have any issues, anacondas and stuff too. And all of a sudden, imports stopped. And then there was a panic. Everyone got out. Everyone either sold them and they went to the ether, or they euthanized them. They just disappeared. There was only a few select people who actually kept stuff back. And then a couple years happened, and this hobby's always known for is cycles of new people coming in, new interests, new, people come in to go like, oh, I'd be interested in, this species or something. And, like with the retics, like locality stuff got to be real popular because, YouTube hyped it up to, oh, this is a new hot thing. And people got into it. Well, then there was a lot of this interest into this stuff. And then that's why they went through the roof, is because it got so expensive because everyone wanted them, but you couldn't get imports. There was only a handful of people who still kept them and bred them. And, then there was this hype. And I tell people all the time, I go, take, when you keep your hybrid green pythons, I always get a little discouraged when the designer hybrid guys never want to, like even MJ, I'll even put MJ out there. When I heard him say, I don't think I'll ever do a pure clutch of green pythons again. I go, come on, man. I mean, I'm just like, that's kind of tragic to hear because, at what point is it less about the species and more about just a snake? It's just a snake. And this kind of leads through a more philosophical thing I feel that the herpetoculture could do, but lacks in doing it because they're just, they always talk about they're big on the future of the hobby, but I don't think the future of the hobby, who knows what it'll be like. But in some ways, I'm always in fear of what it'll be like. And what happens is, you see it in ball pythons, you see it in a lot of these animals with like designer stuff. Is there tends to be a loss of interest in the species itself. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember back in the day where even ball pythons, where seemed like it was more of an interest. Obviously, there was a morph craze to it, but you still had a few people like Barchek and then would still have like some vested interest in that species and would know a little bit about that species. Well, then as time goes on, it's less about the species. It's more about the business or more about like pretty paint job on snake, not about that species. And I think what happens there is a loss of appreciation for those species. And then what happens then is it almost falls in the same category as a lot of other domestic animals. And why did we get into snakes? We got into snakes because we like snakes. We love snakes, or we like all these, whatever species it is that got us drawn to them to begin with. And my fear is it falls under the same thing as like dogs or, cats, where it's just like, we just like a dog for a dog. We don't like the whole canid family. We only like dogs. And this is where I think herpetoculture could make that swing, because we're still in that progression where we're still got a group of us that are still heavily interested in the species themselves. But, like when they introduced wolves into Colorado, into different parks, a lot of farmers threw an absolute shit fit about it because it was like, oh, we don't want them to take our cattle or harm our livestock or do this or do that, rather than looking at other countries and how they use preventatives to protect their livestock. And they also being, in the U.S. probably have better technology and, better access to different things or safer things. Not, I don't want to say just different things because terminating animals and all that, but it's a lack of, if they were feral dogs, even feral dogs, people will look at like their dogs, but there's this disconnect that people have from their domesticated animals to wild canids like coyotes, wolves that are considered vermin in the U.S. that people just rather eradicate than have to choose to live next to. And I don't want to see herpetoculture go down that route, because I think herpetoculture could be the biggest voice for conservation than any zoo, any biologist, anyone else can do. And I'm talking as someone as firsthand experience. My mother she's a religious woman, and she had a fear of snakes. That old saying, only good snake is a dead snake. Well, me being her son had an interest in it. And after a while of, finally working over that, mindset, eventually allowed me to start working with snakes, and saw that I doing well with snakes, even to the point where I could potentially make it into a career. And she has this more open mind to it than if, say, she went to a zoo or went to a wildlife park and someone had a snake and was like, this animal should be protected because of this palm oil plants, wrecking its habitat, where most people, why do people go to zoos? Typically to just fill a weekend. It's unfortunate, but it's true. A lot of people look at zoos as like a weekend fill rather than an actual, I'm going to learn something. But I think, and that's not always the case. Obviously, some of your big mammalian, like elephants, tigers, some of the pandas, the big, well-known animals get a lot of spotlight. But then when you're talking like reptiles, they never get that kind of spotlight. But you can make a strong argument with like ball pythons, with the popularity they've gained, how much more people know what a ball python is compared to like 30 or 40 years ago, when they were less bred or less kept and stuff like that. But there's that fear of, will it just naturally go towards the domestication part? I remember I didn't get to listen to the episode, but the animals at home, when they were talking to the one guy, he was talking about like, at some point all of our snakes could be mixed into one species or something like that, something along those lines. And that's kind of the fear I have to what that'll happen to herpetoculture, because I saw someone recently in ball pipe or somewhere overseas in Indonesia. I think he was from the Philippines, trying to market burn balls and stuff as in like this new hot thing. And I'm just like, man, that, first of all, we have issues in the States with stuff like that getting banned. So what happens when Fish and Wildlife and a lot of these agencies start finding out, oh, these idiots are hybridizing big snakes with little snakes, or we're just banned it all, because it's easier just to go a blatant ban, because if they don't know what they have, we don't know what they have. It's just easier to ban it all. And I think that's some stuff herpetoculture doesn't think about. And my fear is that becomes more prevalent, and the whole why you got interested in reptiles starts fading away. And that's what I don't know, stuff I like. Back to the green pythons, it's unfortunate, but I'm almost seeing that same trend starting to happen with some of the designer guys. Back in the day, like, I mean, I'm sure either one of you guys, you'd want to go to Australia to see that animal in the wild, to experience it, to actually, I think that's almost like the full circle effect, is when you get interested in reptiles, you see that one species that, that draws you in, you finally get to work with it, whether you're doing it as a business or you're just keeping the keep, at some point you do get to maybe go over to those countries to see that particular species you're into, and actually see where your founding stock originated from and stuff like that. And it's like this full circle thing. Like I got lucky enough to go see like some of the species I work with in Indonesia, and I didn't get to see as many in Africa as I want to, but I'll go back to see more. But I see a lot less interest in that when it comes to animals like designers, even ball pythons. I don't hear too many ball python people talking want to take trips to West Africa and stuff like that. Rather it's a fun vacation or whatever is a different story. But I always consider stuff like that, the journey of that is cooler to me than sitting on a beach reading a book and just wasting my time away, compared to like if I went to West Africa to experience their culture, to see that animal and how it impacted places in West Africa, and like the temples and stuff like that they had of them, stuff like that. There's like such a wide spectrum of herpetoculture, and it would be such a shame to just narrow it down to just keeping a snake in a box. And regardless of what it is, that's all we care about. And that's kind of the fear I have when it comes to like these big inflated markets and certain species like the retics, the balls, the green pythons are similar, going to a similar route. Even the carpet pythons back in in the U.S. when a lot of the import, like the European guys were sending a lot of stuff over, you saw a little bit of that too, where it was just this, oh, everyone with the carpets are blowing up for a little bit. It wasn't like a huge blow up or anything like that, but I definitely remember in like 13, 14, and 16, 15, 16 era, there was like a huge influx of, because that's when Starkey and a lot of them were sending stuff over, and a lot of people were super interested in carpets and you guys know Starkey's big, morph guy and stuff. So, and even, Paul too. So, a lot of people got interested in the morphs and, wanted to work with a lot of that stuff. And it kind of created this interest. But then unfortunately, carpet, especially outside of Australia, you only have so many morphs you can mess with. And then, like with a lot of stuff, it hits a peak and then crashes. And then at some point it stabilizes because you get those few people who, once they've put every morph under the sun together in one snake, then there's nothing else you can do other than, line breed and make the prettiest whatever morph of that animal you can. So, I guess as a whole though, I worry about the green python community. I like the green python, most of them for the most part. I don't really have a problem with any of them. It's just, I think it's it's unfortunate they don't want to look at other communities and think their communities above and beyond other communities from falling under that same trap. As far as just overinflated, overhyped, stuff like that, and just end up falling under that same unfortunate situation and end up getting more people interested in just a snake in a box rather than the species itself or creating a living. I don't know, it's hard to say. There's tons of different reasons people get into those crazy popular species, whether it's the fame of the guy who got them interested in it or the lifestyle they live, the status it gives them, whatever it is, so that's kind of my
Yeah,
rant, I guess.
that was a fantastic rant. It's like how Ryan Young says, "Oh well, if these what's one of the what's that one he works with one green tree line.
The
What is it?
ruse, you talking as a sub the
I
ruse?
think it's a
He works with
ruse.
the ruse, and then the Northwesterns. He works a lot with like the Maniquaries and
Oh
stuff like
yeah,
that. He
I
works
think it
with a
was
lot of those too.
I think it was like because he breeds pretty high white Arus. He's like, if they get even more white, I'm gonna have to get rid of them because then they'll
Right,
morph.
right. Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm done with it. Yeah, and I get it. Like like I work with a lot of ball pythons. I'm interested in the morphs and stuff, but I also got a handful of like normal wild caught het for absolutely nothing ball pythons. Because I genuinely find those animals interesting. Like no joke, I'd like to do a Stephen Tillis thing at some point if I can go to West Africa and get the permits to do it. I'd like to import my own locality Pacific ball pythons, not from the general like Ghana, Benin, and stuff. I'd rather go to like Senegal or western part of the Congo, or not western. The western part of the Congo is the furthest eastern range they range, and maybe however far south I can go to collect them. I think stuff like that would be cool. I wouldn't want to just collect them in that one general area they're all collected from. I'd want to get like real unique stuff and see if they vary. Do ball pythons vary? Like another thing I think people don't realize is in the Congo you have the dwarf crocodile. Well, also you have this cave. I think they're considered a species now, or at least a subspecies, but it's one that for the last 5 or 6 thousand years have been stuck in this cave where they developed this bright, vibrant orange head and a few facial structure differences, and they've been isolated in this cave and stuff. So, who knows what you could find out there if you go looking for it, So I don't know. But like I said, I find more than just a morph. Like I like Nick's quote is a morph is different. It's not better, you know. Yep. And then there's like look up the cave African. I don't know what their common name is, but there was like a cave version of one, and it has this vibrant orange head. Yep, you see that? That's a comparison. Maybe not vibrant orange, but it has orange, reds, and yellows in it. But that's a species or subspecies. I don't know what they're categorized as, but stuck into a cave for like the last, like I said, five. It might even been longer than that. Could have been 15,000 years or something. But yeah, they've undergone like a real rapid evolutionary change, similar to Beox. I've heard Beox were relatively new to the Biak archipelago and have went through a rapid change in those environments. So stuff like that I find so interesting and cool. Like that's what I think gets some people in trouble is when you have such a basal interest in something, it's easy for it to, taper out and kind of get bored of that aspect of it. And then you're just like, you burn out essentially. But when you can look beyond just a pretty snake in a box and look at all whatever other history or, evolution, or even if you like going herping to see them, it just gives different aspects of herpetoculture that I think can keep interest for long term if you're willing to explore more and dabble in some of that stuff.
Oh, for sure. It's like why like it's so like the green tree guys all want to do their designers, but like freaking Beox throw some like fucking wacky shit.
Oh yeah.
Like
I
like
saw
why
some
why are why aren't we just breeding pure Beox to see what funky stuff comes out of just pure Beox? It's its own species or subspecies. Like you could just go crazy with that.
some of the stuff Dan Mallory just brought in or is going to bring in those adult. I don't know if they're male or females. The three adults he had on that perch, they were like white splotches, like perfectly white splotches up and down their back, and or at least some of them did. And I'm just like, God, those are so cool. I think I might end up getting Beox now at some point. Need
You
some
should.
Uterenzas first. I need some northern green pythons first. I like those have been always my second favorite outside of the southern species. I've always been a fan. Like whether you're talking scrubs, white lips, what is it? The green pythons. I've always found that southern group really interesting and cool to me. So that's what the stuff I like working with more. I like working with all of it, but if I had to choose, I think the southern stuff. Even the scrub pythons that get dubbed like the dirt snake of the scrub pythons. I think are some of the prettier ones you can get if you look past that. They're common because they get imported more readily than the other ones do. So or more bred consistently. So
Yeah, for sure. The yeah, there's tons to do with green trees. It's so weird how they just went straight to designers when you have all the different species now, which
well,
people have brought out.
I can kind of get the like them not knowing, I guess to a certain degree, but like even then, like sometimes you can look at a species and be like, yeah, there's something different about that. Like Ryan will talk about,
Yeah,
like you
Ryan
can
and
look
Nick.
at like,
Yeah,
yeah, you'll hear him talking, and then like, yeah, you can go like, yeah, there's something just different looking. Like you look at a Roo or a Southern in general, and then you look at like a Biak, and you're just like, this is not the same animal, like at all. Like you get and that I think that might just be a founder of or the where unless it was because it was a green snake, it was a green snake to everyone. They didn't look at anything differently or thought of anything being different. So yeah, they but even whenever they were classified, because whatever reason, a lot of people want clarification on these are different on paper rather than just making the assumption like with scrub pythons, I have to tell people, those the northern and southern will be different species. Just because it's not, scientifically written down in paper yet, they will be separate species. It'll fall in the same line as all the other animals. So, don't be
that
breeding
that
your northerns and or bar necks to your southerns and all that. And I don't know,
yeah,
but
I
you
think that's
can't
gonna be
stop.
out soon, right? Like I think Ryan was busting Steven's balls, although it sounds like Steven's actually bred most of them. But like Ryan and
Right.
Nick have already like, oh yeah, there's like 7 or 8 species or something.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I sometimes I hope I sometimes worry about the scrub python clade that sometimes I think they might fall under that. Uh, I hope it doesn't, but sometimes I wonder. I don't know if I want to keep publicly saying this because I don't want people to, harass Steven, but like sometimes I just worry about sometimes people, let's just put it like this. I heard the way he talked about the lady who bred the barneck and the southerns, and it was just, Ryan threw up in his mouth, but Steven was like, oh, it's still a neat looking snake and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, and that's how it usually starts before next thing you know it. Let's do the retic route. We're going to breed the Tannenbar. We're going to breed some of the mainland stuff into the Tannenbars and make super dwarfs. And, we're going to chase the retic route. We're going to do that with scrubs or something like that. Or,
Yeah,
we want to breed that albino to a Boland's python. And then maybe we can get black, albino snakes or something
yeah.
crazy.
I
So
love that or, with like colubrids. They tried to make like albino black pines and try to pass them as pure, and it's no. You
Yeah.
breed a northern pine to a black pine, and you get some chocolatey looking animals, and you breed, and it's
Yeah.
like no. It's not
Yeah.
right.
So going back to the green tree, I think back then you could plead ignorance, even though they obviously looked all different and all that. And I found like you could apply that to so many different species, right? If it wasn't officially separated, then I'm not doing anything wrong. I didn't know any better. I didn't know
Yeah.
blah blah blah. I
Right.
feel
Right.
like now we know.
Oh
We
yeah.
know that they're different. They are classified as different. The species that aren't classified, just like let's say scrubs, like the if you know, you know, and it's known out there. I feel like at this point, why the heck are you still doing it? I don't know, but you know better. You should know better. So like obviously I've said it multiple times. I'm against hybridizing. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get
Yeah.
why people will breed a Ritic to a berm ball, all that type of shit. To me, it's just anyway.
And
I'll
then it's
refrain from using those adjectives, but there's simply nothing good that can come out of it. But some people have that passion and want to do it. I just don't get it. It's not me. I think it's fucking stupidity. But anyway, there you go.
well,
I said
yeah.
it.
I'm with you. I think sometimes it's. I get more discouraged when I hear a green python person have all this interest in designers, yet no interest at all in like the pure species and stuff like that. And you know what always drives me nuts with this? I hate the term when people use locality with like scrubs, retics, green pythons, carpet pythons. Carpet python people, maybe this is biased because I am a carpet python guy, but they seem to be more in tune with like, all right, a locality is like a gelatin is a locality of Cheney, or Tully is a locality of Cheney, or you know, with variegata and stuff like that. You got the Cape Yorks, gelatins, and the Papuans and stuff like that, and stuff that's a locality of that species or whatever. And then like although green python guys like, what's your favorite locality? Aru or something like that, or they'll say like uh what is it, Cyclops or something like that. And they'll just like, you can tell they're using all the localities of the different species and stuff like that. They mix species and locality, and I think that's just dangerous to do. Retic people say it all the time, like locality this, locality that, but it's like, no, those are clearly different things. You just, because they weren't formally classified as, well, they were as subspecies, but I guess some people they're kind of like zoos, where zoos don't really look at subspecies as like a identifier of something truly different or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a shame, because especially in herpetoculture, man, you lose that stuff overnight. You start breeding a lot of that stuff into this more stuff or much stuff, and then you lose that locality or that species and stuff, and it's gone to herpetoculture. I mean, we've seen it in like Indian pythons were almost lost to herpetoculture. South African rocks were lost to herpetoculture. Uh, Kofi owls are damn near lost to herpetoculture. Granted, now that's a locality of culture, but still, it was a unique and I remember iconic animal. Back in when I came in, I remember it was like a big thing to get that locality. But now it's kind of like it's gone into the ether of herpetoculture, mainly because of Nido scare and whatever Nido did knock out, or people got afraid and euthanized a bunch of animals nonsensically. So, but then yeah, there's countless of animals that like scrubs. I think scrubs, if you're not careful, I could see exports and them stopping at some point. And then I hope people keep good enough track of lineage, and hopefully no like retic guy decides to just start muddying them, a bunch of them, to make some new designer thing. So,
And Sumatrans as well, right? Like, there's that orange head Sumatrans that people are breeding into their normal Sumatrans when they're probably different species.
which one you talk? Oh, you're talking about in the short tails and stuff.
Yeah, I'm a little confused on the. Oh, there you
Oop.
go.
I'm not
All
sure if
right,
he's still
sorry,
there, but
headphone
he's
died.
probably rebooting his earpiece and everything's losing out there. Welcome back, William.
Sorry, it just died. I was saying, am I back now? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can
yeah.
hear you.
Okay. Well, yeah, the Sumatran stuff. So, man, so I don't think it could. I think that's more locality. I'll be the guy who I know in the short tail community that they look at it as a species, but I think in most cases, like if you look at Borneos and Sumatrans, they're only like 1.5% divergent from each other. They were a species where I thought it was funny how retic people couldn't comprehend that retics are different species, but you look at something like a short tail and the bloods that are same general area or same areas and they're less divergent. Yes, yet you got four species of short tails in comparison to like the retics where they're in more areas and take up more space or more different islands and they don't think they're a different species. But I think the orange heads are just the locality of the southerns and stuff. I'm not saying you should interbreed them because I mean, on top of like it'd be counterintuitive. Why would you take like a jet black snake and breed it to like an orange, tan, and brown look, almost more Borneo looking animal to them? Because it just ends up either the black snake overpowers the northern Sumatran and it just looks like just a normal southern Sumatran. So it's like, well, why would I do that? Outside of the few people who do it to put the T positive albino into the darker southern locality stuff. But that's like just, some stuff it's like, why would I breed the or not hybrids, but why would I cross the localities if I don't have to? And that's one of those. It's kind of like the Sarawak Borneos. They're like they're not look different, but I hear they feel different. I've never actually got my hands on them, but I hear they feel a little bit different than other surrounding populations of Borneos. So stuff like that. And then you got the what is it, the Myanmar short tail or something that was only classified off of one specimen that was ever found. And they classified it as a whole species. It's like a yellow blood python, but the short tail complex is weird. They were like the group of people that were like, yeah, these are all different species, but then all these surrounding other pythons like the retics and stuff like that were just we're not worried about it, or the berms and stuff like that were another one. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
think
makes you
that's
want.
yeah.
Makes you wonder like how many actual like is there 25 species of retics, subspecies and subspecies, right? Like
Right.
there's thousands of islands in Indonesia,
Yeah, I have
and
a
then berms as well
yeah.
with
Well,
their
I have a
different
theory.
retics.
I have a theory on the whole retic thing. I tell people I think they're the best and the biggest invading pythons out of the whole clade because they key out to be more genetically related to the Indo-Australian stuff than they do the Southeast Asian stuff. And yet they were that clade of animals were the ones that made it across the Wallach line like 12 or 15 million years ago. And I think, I remember hearing Daniel Natusch said this. He made a statement. He's like, I think it's weird that you see dwarf berms or the berms in, South Sulawesi, Bali, and some parts of Java and stuff. And that made me start thinking to myself, well, because fossils don't really fossilize very well, and especially snakes, and and the towards on the equator and all that, and hot humid environments. And I kind of think, in my personal opinion, this is my opinion, I think Burmese pythons were almost everywhere the retics were, and I think what happened was the retics just did a better job as the invader because they can deal with human encroachment better. They better at hiding. They can take a lot more variety of food sources, I think, than berms can. And I think there's just overall just a more adaptable python in most cases. And I think a lot of times they took over a lot of uh, the berms range, and what you saw was in those Java, Bali, and South Sumatra is they shrunk down to a smaller size. But then why don't you see them in like Borneo and Sumatra and stuff? Well, I think they did try to shrink down, but they couldn't compete with the animal that was already in that niche, the short tail python clade. So I think they just essentially died out because they couldn't take the big prey items because they couldn't compete with the retics, and they couldn't take much of the smaller prey items because that was already occupied by the short-tailed pythons. And now you're seeing it up in Southeast Asia where you got both retics and berms in the same habitat that are still at that and I think what really keyed me into that is like whenever you see the Florida berms and how big they get, and then when I heard on Snake Talk they were talking about this guy from Myanmar or something was talking about researching and studying berms, and he said he biggest one he ever caught was like 12 or 13 foot. But when you look at like Florida, you'll get, I mean, 15, 16, 18 foot just monster snakes. And I think what you're seeing now is in Southeast Asia is the berms are they're either going to go extinct or they're going to shrink down. But berms can also handle cooler temps than retics. So there's parts of southern China that they can hang out where the retics can't quite get to yet. Who knows in the next million years if they'll evolve to be able to adapt to cooler climates? I'm sure they could. But yeah, I think that's what you're seeing with the berms and the retics right now. I think, like I said, that's a hypothesis, but I think it's a pretty reasonable one considering like why don't you see berms in some of those other countries that you see retics and stuff? Where I think that's the most reasonable explanation for it. But I don't know. It's like that's another reason why I find herpetoculture interesting. You can all these like ecological niches and what caused what events to potentially happen. Will we ever know? Probably not, because there probably not enough research to go into looking into the pythons, for Christ's sake. No one's going to care about that. But I find that kind of stuff interesting, and I think it could, it keeps, like I said, it's just another sector of this hobby that I find cool and fascinating. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That was like a Nick Mutton style.
Yeah, that was kind of like the layman
exactly
term.
like that.
Nick can get papers of a bunch of this stuff. I only have so much access to different things. And then when I listen to other people talk about like what they find interesting or weird, I'll pay attention to it, and then I'll kind of dissect it in my head. And whether it's wrong, I don't say it as gospel either. I'm just saying this is just a hypothesis. This is a layman's hypothesis too. That has no educational background. That's just assuming this. It's just it's like we're like fantasy football, teams and stuff like that. We're just hoping for the best, or just making assumptions and having fun doing it. So that's, I don't know. I don't take it any like this is something that is what happened or anything like that. So, but yeah, that's
sure.
just, yeah, I think, and then like I said, I think that's what keeps herpetoculture interesting for me, at least, is because, like I said, if, because I'm sure like with you guys, you probably find some parts of the hobby you'll sizzle out on, or it'll kind of get wearing, or you kind of just, I don't want to say burnt out, but I guess burnt out in a way. But then you can have other aspects of the hobbies you find super interesting, whether it's the history or the, reproducing the animals, all kinds of different stuff. So, but actually, I got some questions for you guys now. Dom and about his pygmy python. So I got a question for you. You've had numerous success with your pygmies. How do you reproduce your pygmies? Uh-oh. Did someone mute something? Or am I just...
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Actually, this way, my mute button went just black. I can't tell if it's actually muted or unmuted. I have no idea.
Oh.
It literally disappeared. So, sorry, repeat the question.
How do you go about breeding your pygmy pythons? Like feeding wise and all that? Primarily feeding is what I'm most interested in hearing.
Primary feeding or the reproduction, I'll say it really simply. Honestly, I reproduce them the identical way I reproduce all carpet pythons.
Okay.
So it's the exact same cookie cutter breeding recipe. So if you've heard it on Morelia Python, I've done a breeding show on our show. I've done it with Morelia Python. They've said it too. So the exact same way. I basically stop feeding them. I lower the temperature slowly during the winter season. Right now they're going down. I'll probably pair them up in about 2 or 3 weeks. They'll pair up for a while, and then once I notice an ovulation, separate them and kind of go from there. Okay. So that's like I can go much more into detail if you really want to. Do you want me to go more into detail? Is that good enough?
What I'm kind of more interested in is like so when you start feeding them to bulk them up, how often do you feed them? What do you like size prey items? And do you have an idea of roughly, if you had to guess, like size-wise? I know that none of us weigh our snakes for the most part, but if you got a general size range, like how big your pygmies are, your females in particular.
I can take out a female in a minute or so and show it to you. So I've bred now pygmies. I think I'm in my 4th year in a row, and that female has bred 4 years in a row. So just to give an idea, and every year she's right back to size and ready to go. and I can guarantee this year she'll go again. She just breeds every single year and is nice and healthy, and she is a I've got 2016, so it gives you an idea. So
Okay.
2016. So, and I acquired the pair that were adults. So,
Okay.
um, how big are they? They're about 24 inches, and I'd say around not as big as a golf ball. In Canadian terms, it would be like just a little under a loonie. So I don't know, like an inch wide, an inch high, give or take. I'll take them out in a few seconds. So after they lay their eggs, I'd say I probably wait about a week or two, and then I start feeding them. Initially, it'll be really tiny meals, like we're talking about like hopper, like I'd say even like a hopper mice initially, just to get them back on food, and then eventually I'd be feeding them prey size about the size of I don't even know if I'd go small adult mice, give or take. So maybe even small. So, and I tend to feed mainly only rats just because mice aren't as easily accessible for me. So rat wise, I'd be doing like a fuzzy rat, like
Hmm.
like so it's pretty small, and they bulk up really really fast. Like, and
Oh yeah.
they get decent size again. I'll show you my females in a few seconds after that, and honestly they're a little chunky. So,
Right.
and they lose all their body weight after laying, and they lay about last year I've had two females go and they both laid 9 eggs. So,
Okay.
and one eight good, one slug for both of them, and they were pretty good, and they look like death after completely lose all their body weight. They lose more than half their body weight, and then they bounce back within a month and a half, 2 months. They're right back to their normal shape. They look great. They feel great. And honestly, I've had no reason not to breed them again because they want to breed. And I truly think that with smaller species, like the smaller Antaresia, I think are just, they're primed to go every year.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that they're just like, I hate to say it, but they're a feeder species. They're a
Yeah.
species in the wild that just reproduces a ton.
Yeah.
How
Oh,
often are they? Oh, did you freeze?
yeah. It's to say, it looked like he's
I
frozen to
think he's
me.
frozen. Uh
Oh shoot.
oh.
Okay. I don't know. I was curious because I've read pygmy pythons, but I've had reproduction issues. And as far as fertility, like I would get very bad fertility in the animals. And I was about to just scrap all my pygmies and start out with a whole different group. And mine are, I mean, they're Don Patterson and Lasik crosses, so it's about as out cross as you can get with pygmy pythons, you know. And I'm sure I'm sure Don works with
Yeah, I think his
just
are Dawn
just his
animals.
line, you
Yeah,
know. So I
like
figured it would just, mine are
and
about as out.
honestly, I wonder if Dawn and Casey's are just the same line, because
Yeah,
like
I've heard stories
Dawn,
about it.
because Casey and Dawn, like Dawn probably didn't even give it as his name. Somebody probably just slapped that label on it, right?
Yeah, I've heard of
So
that
yeah,
story too.
because our Angolans are like Dawn is Houston crossed Lazic line Angolans kind of thing. So
Yeah,
they're all they're
I
all
think a
kind
lot of
of
those zoos
yeah.
have the same bloodline and similar pool. But I was just like, so I would get crappy fertility, and I was about to just honestly, I was thinking about just scrapping the whole project because I was like, maybe my group is just, I hate to put it like this, but just essentially just, they're infertile or had fertility issues because they might have been like more inbred, I guess, whatever that means for that species. And I was gonna scrap it, and I was talking to Ryan about it with pygmy pythons. I go, man, I had real shit fertility with my pygmy pythons, but I mean, they're like I said, they're Don Lasik. They're about as outcross as you could possibly get. They're like first generation too. So I go, and then I know, Ryan works with just the Lasik stuff, and Justin has success. He works with just primarily Don stuff, and I'm just like, and they've had multiple generations of those, and I'm just like, it just doesn't make sense why I'd be having issues. And so I was talking to Ryan, and Ryan was like, if you look at pygmy pythons in the wild, you see like females around eggs around 2 or 3 eggs. And he's like, I wonder if we just grow them too big too quickly, and if that's what's causing some fertility issues. Because he said whenever he fed less, he would get better reproduction from his pygmies than if he fed. So like most of my Australian stuff, I'll feed from like August to November, into October's, and they about weekly, bi-weekly, depending, but it's usually smaller meals. And I had a um, I would do that with my pygmy pythons. Well, I would get really half-ass fertility, but I would never have this problem with any of my other Antaresia for the most part. So I was just like, Dad, this is just weird. And then I talked to Ryan, and Ryan said, "Yeah, dude, he's like, man, I fed my female 4 hopper mice or fuzzy mice, and she ended up going, and laid a perfect clutch of 4 or 5 eggs or something like that." So yeah, I was gonna say yours are pretty good size. Yours are probably bigger than mine even.
Really hard to try to capture this in the
Yeah,
frame, but it gives you an idea. Like if you look at my fingers, the size, like the body around is still a decent size, right?
yeah.
And this is a female that has laid 4 years in a row,
And she's
right?
a 16, so she's 10
She's a
years old or
2016.
almost 10 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
So no idea how much of talking you guys have heard me because I talked for like 2 minutes until I
Yeah,
realized both your faces froze.
froze.
I don't know
Right,
what
right.
point. I don't know what point I lost connection. That's the first time I've lost connection. So I'm not quite sure where I ended talking, but they're pretty chunky, and I have no problem admitting, yeah, she's a little chunky. She's big around, but man, she's gonna lay, and she's gonna be right back to the same size as like to this tiny little animal after.
Okay. Yeah, because I was just curious because I was like I said, I have a 2.3 group of pygmies, and one female I've yet to get lay. She would build decent follicles and just never lay. And then that's when I was talking to Ryan, and he was just like, I wonder if they're just too fat. And he was talking about Tracy was talking about how he goes females a lot of times when you have too much fat on the ovaries and the follicles that they could restrict development and cause them essentially either stay stagnant or reabsorb, or you get half-ass fertility. And I was just wondering because if you think about pygmy pythons in general, they're lower on the food chain, so they probably don't need as much to reproduce to begin with, and they don't really grow big enough in the wild. Typically, to eat mammals. They typically stay on rodents, or not rodents, reptiles their whole life. Because they still in the same habitat as the western stimsons. So they trade. As babies, they can have the same food sources, but stimsons grow big enough to start eating mostly mammalian prey compared to pygmies that stay in their own niche. They eat primarily reptiles, kind of like blackheads and olive pythons. One typically eats reptiles, and the other one will eat anything with a pulse. So, and I was like, this kind of makes sense. I was feeding my female, like small adult mice. I was feeding them pretty big prey items for a little while. And then I would notice, like, man, out of all my Antaresia, I'm getting crappier and crappier, just not as good, reproduction from them. So this year I'm going to try. I only fed the one female that never bred for me. I gave her one quail and around Halloween, like one little hatchling cornet's quail or whatever. And then the other ones that did lay for me but had a crappy clutch, I didn't feed them at all after they laid because it didn't even look like they lost any weight. So I started feeding, I only fed them a handful of quail, hatchling quail, and I'm going to see if that has any effect or if that seems to at least go in the progression of clutches are getting better, not worse. So that's kind of what you know I'm going to experiment with. 'Cause originally, I was going to scrap the
So
pygmies and start with a new group.
so I have 2.2. And my 1.1 has produced every year, no problem. Then I got a second 1.1, and I bred them the first year, and I got my first clutch of slugs, 100% slugs. I was like, what the heck? That's a weird one, and all that. Then I started wondering, like, is it a problem with the female? Is it a problem with the male? What's going on? So what I decided to do was I wanted to keep them separate because I wanted to have two completely unrelated clutches. But then I started looking at everything, and honestly, I felt like the problem was my male. You guys still there? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So what I decided to do was I bred the one male that I knew bred that female every year, and I bred him to the two females the next year. And then I got two perfect fertility clutches, like 8 out of 9 eggs. And then I was like, okay, so what's the problem now? Is the problem the male or the females? So my females both produced perfectly the next year once I used the male that I knew produced properly. So then I'm stuck with one male that, in my opinion, is probably the problem. So, and both my girls, I don't think getting your female a little chunky is an issue. Like you saw that female, she's chunky. I have no problem admitting it. She's chunky. Okay. But I'm happy her being that chunky because I know she's going to reproduce and she's going to look like death after. And so far, she's been doing that every year, and she comes off so skinny that I have no problem fattening her up, knowing that she's going to reproduce. If she didn't reproduce this year, I can guarantee the entire year she's eating like one or two mice, and that's it, right?
Right.
So, but I bet you she's going to go. And what did I end up doing? I'll be honest. That adult male, I ended up sending to Shan, and he's got an unrelated male to all the babies that I've had in the previous year. That is completely unrelated, and he's got a couple of females that are growing up, and I'm going to see if that one male that wouldn't produce with mine is now going to produce with his. So I'm wondering, maybe it's your male.
Yeah. Well, I
I don't
got the
know. It's
one.
just a thought.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because so the one clutch that was a complete slug out was from the male that's been having I've been having issues with those baby or those clutches. And the new one I got from Justin, who was a monster too. He was bigger than my females. This was a big old ass. It was a big pygmy python. But I think it's like 15 years. It was like one of his first babies that he kept back and was using for a breeder. And I got that male, and that male ended up siring a few, at least mostly good eggs for the most part. So I might just try him more on that. I needed to get something because I don't. He's like I said, he's probably close to 15, 16 years old. So however longer I have with him, I'm gonna try to get a couple more clutches from him because God, those babies suck. I hate cis feeding those little pygmy pythons. They were fucking horror. They were so bad. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just go buy morning geckos and feed them morning geckos. And I did, and they ate all them. They would eat the morning geckos, but as soon as I'd run out of them, I was like, oh, I don't want to assist feed them. And then eventually they'd wither away because I just would run out of stuff. Because I would assist feed them those drumsticks, and it would take 4 or 5 or 6 attempts to get them to hold it down because they would just spit it out. I'd put it down their throat, and they would work the whole time just to spit it back out. And I think a few of them died sheerly from just the stress of that, you know, that trauma of just shoving a pinky leg down or a mouse leg down its throat. So I was like, God, this sucks. I go, that was the one thing I did like with the green python guys, like with MJ and stuff, feeding crested geckos. I was like, man, it'd just be easier to feed. But then I'm like, oh, I hate lizards. I don't want to work with lizards. Or I don't hate lizards. I hate keeping lizards. So I was like, oh, I really don't want to keep lizards that have to feed strictly to the pygmy pythons. So I think I'm going to try
So,
something different.
so what I'm going to say is pygmies are the easiest and coolest little pythons to keep,
Yep.
just as keeping. They're amazing. They're bulletproof. They are like tame. They don't bite. They're one of the like best. I could see this little python being kept everywhere, zero issues. Now, breeding wise, in my opinion, I think they're easy to breed. They're not hard to breed. The problem is that that wall is 100% the babies. They are horrible. They are the worst. They are shittier than any. In my opinion, they've got to be one of the worst pythons to get started. But that's my opinion.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so my success rate sucks. It's horrible as you can imagine. Just to give you an idea, um, we managed to get, and I'm saying we because I do it jointly with Shan, and he's the one who mainly does the like raising of the baby. I breed them, he raises them. That's been our deal forever. We've managed to get three babies survive from the second clutch. The first clutch, everything died. Second clutch, we got three babies that are now being raised up that are his raise up to breed to that extra male that I had. And for the first time ever, this is my fourth year breeding them in a row, or breeding them all together. It is the first time ever that I actually have babies for sale for the public.
Oh
So
man.
I'm just saying that that's how much they suck. It took me 4 years of breeding them, and for the past 2 years, I've had two clutches. Okay, so just to give you an idea, like
Oh man. This
it,
sounds
it
like
took a long time for me to get there. But if you talk to like you said, fucking Julander, he's been into it for a while and he's doing a lot better than me. But it's been one heck of an uphill battle. I think
oh
it
yeah.
just it's a species that's really tough to get started. But for any Canadians listening, yes, we have baby pygmy pythons for sale. I think we only have four, but you know what? Four to me is a huge success,
Oh
and those
yeah.
babies have had over 30 meals on their own, and that's why we're finally putting them up for sale. Just to give
Right.
you an idea, like they've had over 30 meals on their own, eating on their own, and like mice are ASF. So,
Oh, that's
um,
nice.
but I mean, is it even worth it? I'm just gonna put it out there. Like the amount of work you put into it to have a baby that's worth what, $800 Canadian. So that's how much is that in the states? How much are you guys
Ooh.
buying them for? What is
Well,
That
it?
that,
they
that that's like 600. That's like 550, 600
yeah,
bucks
they at one
American.
point they were as low as $400. I remember, like maybe prior to COVID. I think I was
So
talking to Justin because
it's not
whenever
worth it.
oh well, here's the thing though, is because now they are pretty rare in the U.S. as far as like you just don't see a whole lot of them. Is I think Justin said he was going to charge quite a bit more because it just, I mean, no one, hardly anyone else is breeding them, and yeah, they are, like you were mentioning, are a pain in the butt to get started. So he was like, I'm just, it's silly not to charge a little bit more for them because they're rare, hard to get started, and literally almost once you get them started, they're bulletproof, and almost anyone can keep them because you don't have to worry about outgrowing anything, So yeah, I was talking to him, and I go, of course, when I was thinking about getting a new group of them, he's like, that's when the price wants to go up. But it was one of those animals I totally could see why they would go up in price for sure. You know.
I think myself and Don Patterson breeds pygmies in Canada. I don't know if he still does, but he has met for often, like a lot. I think there might have been one other guy from Toronto that used to breed him because I saw him probably like 8 or 9 years ago. I saw some for sale once by him, but I don't know of anybody else who breeds pygmies in Canada. I think we might be the only two. You know anybody else, Mike?
Nah, I don't think so.
No.
Same with Stimsons. Like they're not around anymore. Like old guys like Henry used to have Stimsons, and then Mickey had Stimsons, and they're not around. The only things that are really around are Spotteds and Children's kind of thing that a few people have, and they sell for 250, 300 bucks all day long.
I
But they're
know
not
of a few
overproduced.
people. I know of a few people that have just brought in Stimsons though from the that are coming in from the UK order. So they're
Or
real
did they get
if they're good enough.
Westerns? Because Don
I don't
bred
know.
Westerns, but I think he got rid of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But there are a few because they're available through UK. You can bring them in.
So do we want? Do we want to hit on rings, or do we want to wrap it up? Because I think we can go on for like another 4 hours easily.
Yeah, probably could. So I'll leave it up to you. I'll say like no more than 10 minutes. If you're willing to go quickly into it, William,
Yep.
it's up to you.
Yeah.
If not, we'll
Yeah.
close it out.
I can knock it out real quick. It's not. So ring. I There might be a little tangent because I always, with the rings and white lips being like, I always consider rings like pygmy versions of white lips. They act similar. They breed similar. I found that if you got, I think a lot of the trouble people have with that species, like I'm talking white lips and rings, is because I think a lot of them had missexed animals. Because if you guys are familiar with Ryan talking about his Papuan python issue, when it comes to those thin snake animals, when they shed, the hemipenes shed too, and they get stuck in the cloaca and they build up after a while. And then when you go to probe them, you can probe an animal and it ends up not probing, the sex it was, sold as. And I think that's the same thing with white lips, and rings and stuff like that. There's a lot of them, even obviously with rings being captive bred, still after a while, if you get enough accumulation of shed, unless that animal's breeding, his hemipenes aren't getting inverted to, release any of those sheds or whatnot. So I think a lot of the people are having trouble with a lot of that stuff is because they missex them. Because I've noticed, and this is my opinion, when I have like a male female of both rings white lips, is they always have gone for me. Rather the female got retained eggs or whatever, but they would almost always breed and reproduce and stuff for me. Um, I would because I had some northern white lips, right? This is what really made me think about the whole Ryan with the probe and the stuck hemipene sheds. Is I got three adult white lips from Ben Rennick when he got a group from Mystic Reptiles back in the day. Well, he was looking to move those animals. He asked me, "Hey, do you want these?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll take them." And I got them. Well, we popped them, or he popped them at the time, and he popped them as female. So I took the three females and bred got two males from Ryan Young years later. Start trying to breed them. Wouldn't have any success the first year I didn't have any success. The second year, as soon as I bred the one of the females ended up going. And, like most people, I was like, oh my God, this is, so exciting. And it's not that it's not exciting, but, you know, after that female or that year, I was like, all right, I'm going to try to give her a year off. I'm going to try another female or one of the other females. Tried them because I tried them the year prior. I did that one female. They didn't go for me, which I chalked it up. Oh, they're a hard species. That must be what it was. And so I tried those other ones again, and they still didn't go for me. But the other female that bred from the year prior still bred. She just bred way later in the year. And so after her second year in a row breeding, I was like, all right, I'm just not going to even put a male in with her. And so I tried the other two, still nothing, still nothing. Year after year, I wasn't getting anything from these other two. Well, 2020 this year, I decided, all right, I gave my one female a year off. I'm going to try breeding her again. Sure as shit, dude. As soon as I put them together, fed her up for it, she reproduced. Well, my ring pythons, once I fed the ring pythons up and put them together, they would breed. I mean, my male would just be all over these females. As long as the female wasn't, sometimes she would get so food aggressive, you could tell she would probably go after the male. But whenever you put them in at the right time, they seem to work out pretty well. But I was like, man, what's up with these other two? Well, and then eventually one of them went off food, one of the females. And I was like, I know what a female swelling for ovulation looks like. I go, these aren't ovulations. Well, I noticed one male. So I have these ARS racks, the big Vision tub racks. And there was the breeding female, the other two females, and the one was pacing the front of the tub. When the other one above it was building decent follicles, while the other one male I knew was a male was breeding. And that's when I was like, okay, something's not going, or something's up here. And then that's when and they're 6+ foot snakes, and they're assholes. They're terrible to deal with. So I had to, I fed them. And while I was feeding them, I took a probe and I probed them real quick. And I felt that barrier where it only probed maybe a little over knuckle deep on a 6-foot snake. And I was like, oh, I feel that barrier. Well, I remember what Ryan was talking about, the stuck sheds. So I took a chance and I just twist and pushed, and I felt the pop. And then it probed. He ended up probing almost like a whole finger deep. And I was just like, no fucking shit. And, I pulled it out, and there was no blood. They didn't break any, the wall of, if it was a female. So I was like, no fucking shit. I ended up having two males. And, because I was just like, man, it seems like when you get a good sex pair, I'm not saying you can't have animals that aren't compatible, but it seems like if you got a sex pair, they will breed, and cycle feeding seems to be a big thing with them, as far as like fasting them for a period of time and then hammering them with food during the reproductive cycle. And that's all I did. I just hammered her with food at the right time of year, and she just, all of it, like the rings and the white lips would just build big follicles. The males would come right in. And it's funny because the rings do it too, where they seem to be really compatible. Like it's almost like the male will guard the female. It's, even though I keep my males like half the size of the female, so you get this little male sitting on top of a female, trying to like come out at your face, or trying to, almost like he's trying to defend her. But once she's gone through the reproductive cycle, they're almost like a divorced couple at that point. They're not attacking each other, but you can tell they just sitting on opposite ends. They don't care about each other. If one irritates the other, it might pop the one to get it to go away. But it's funny in that way. But other than that, when they're reproductively cycling, they seem pretty easy to breed. And I'm not trying to say you can't get ones that aren't compatible or don't like each other. But I've noticed, like with ball pythons, and I know this is going to irritate some people, but you see certain personalities when you get a large group of snakes, which ball python, like, most people, me in particular, my largest group of pythons are ball pythons. And I notice some of those same behaviors I've seen in ball pythons. So I tell people, careful when you hear people talk about these recipes and stuff like that, like it's gospel and what you have to do. Because I think when you've been in herpetoculture long enough, you'll notice that no, a lot of these will breed a lot of different ways. You just got to get out of your way of like, oh, it's only can breed like this, because I've seen ball pythons hit almost every like rumor you heard with other species when it came to male combating. What it would be another compatibilities, combating. A lot of things I've heard of other python people would say, I've seen in multiple breedings of ball pythons. So I tell people it's like, if you treat it seems like if you treat a lot of pythons similarly, you'll get real similar results. Obviously, some you need to tweak a little bit more, rather it's more cooling. Some triggers seem to be more food, little triggers like that, but there seems to be a really straightforward formula to a lot of it if you're willing to just look at all of them as a whole rather than just one species. At least what I've
Yeah.
noticed. Like ring pipe, they didn't seem that hard to
You're
breed to me,
100%
anyways.
right on that.
Yeah, because like I've said, I've
Yeah.
seen some weird stuff. Like people would talk about like carpet pythons will just kill each other, males will just kill each other, and but I've kept males together in Darwins and jungles, and as long as they have a big enough enclosure and they can get away, sometimes they will. I've had Darwins where they were fine for a while, and then like I left them together, and then one day I noticed slash marks on their back, not like hellacious ones like you've seen in retics, but like little cuts from biting each other. But I was just like, after that though, they were fine with each other as long as they could get away with each other. Now, if you're having them in a small enclosure or tub, then yeah, they'll probably kill each other if they can't get away. But I've seen it in retics where Ben was looking to move one retic male, and he was giving the guy a breeder male to another breeder, and the male was on the bottom cage, and he decided to switch the cages so he wouldn't have to change everything around. And we cleaned the cages and we swapped the males' cages. Well, the one male, I think it was the male he was keeping, was just tore up the cage, smacked, threw the water bowl around, was all pissed off, smelt the other male. And then the male he ended up giving to that guy didn't give a care in the world about that male. Like he didn't phase him, didn't nothing. Like you could see this two same species with different personalities of how they, just reacted towards each other's presence or smell, I guess technically. So
I've accidentally put two males together thinking I was breeding them, and they stayed in the same cage for 2 months together with zero issues. And I put that male in with another female that turned out to be a male as well, and they just combated and tore the shit out of each
yeah,
other, and I had to separate, right? So
well,
sometimes same species, same animal, but with
yep.
a different male, nothing, another male, something, and I've proven all those males out, and I knew they were males. You know what I mean?
Same with
So
those
yeah,
white lips
totally
too,
agree.
man. Like sometimes I noticed like they would sit with each other fine for a little while, and then there was some that would like sometimes they would get triggered and they would bite each other because either he got tired of just being right on like them sitting next to each other or getting too close to his face like another male and he would bite it. But I only had one instance where one male wrapped the other male. That was the only time I ever had that. Because they were infamous with biting and killing each other essentially if they didn't like each other. So I think a lot of it's this missexed animal. So if you can, like if you get those snakes, I always recommend just try to do your best. Like when I got those papoon pythons, I double checked their sex, just to make sure they were females. And the same thing with white lips. Like, and I had some people recently hit me up and said, dude, I picked up four wild caught animals, and they all ended up being male. I don't know what his sex ratio he was hoping for, but he ended up getting all males. And I said, dude, they just, I think it's something to do with the thinner skin pythons. Pythons real thin skin, like the Papuans, white lips, and all them. I think they're more, especially when they're real humid species and more inclined to have crappy sheds. I think, you're going to run into that risk. So if you can, I
Right.
always recommend, trying to double check their sex, because even if you think you have a pair and, they seem okay with each other, that still may not mean you have a pair. Like I said with those white lips, like they were fine for years. I only had one or maybe two altercations where they try to wrap each other, but you just chalk it up to they're just a hard species. And same thing, you might get a pair, but they're not compatible. I've had that with ball pythons where it's a proven pair, but they like the female will literally combat the male, like beat the living hell out of them just to get them away from them or her. So it's like I said, you'll see all kinds of personalities with these animals. Especially if you're working with such a wide range, you can only have so many of one species. So sometimes we pocket ourselves where, you know, and that was always a problem. That was always this funny thing, like with when I would listen to like Reptile Radio or NPR back in the day when they'd had these python specific breeders who would have these known for a species, but their species sample size was really small. And I always was like,
Oh yeah,
we
the
treat it
that
like
Papuan
gossip.
episode
Yeah, well,
with Kevin.
Papuan.
That
Well,
that that was a cool show, but like,
yeah.
I think he only had a few animals, kind of thing.
Well, and then like I remember a Maclot one where this guy would talk about, oh, you need this big water bowl for them to sit in. This was like years and years ago. And I'm just like, you don't. You don't need any of that stuff, or you don't need to like, turn the lights to a certain angle to get a male in the mood to breed. Like you would hear like, and I don't want to dog those guys because those guys, there was no other research or no other way you could get that kind of information other than trial and error. But I think that was the problem that happened with, where the ball python people and the other python people segregated themselves. And, there's like, it was the same thing with like the miscellaneous python people where they chose not to feed stuff much at all because they were trying to be anti ball python people. So they would just, ball python people would feed every week, sometimes 4 or 5 times a week. Some ball python were ridiculous. They were the opposite, and they were like to the point of unhealthy, aspect of feeding. And then you had the miscellaneous group where I noticed a lot of those guys were we barely fed. We would take months off without feeding. Then when we were in the feeding season, we would still barely feed so that female wouldn't have enough fat reserves or enough bulk on her to have a good clutch. But here's a caveat: they would keep doing that after a while and they would have one successful clutch. Well, yeah, she won't burn body weight. And if she keeps enough on after years and years and years, then eventually she will reproduce because she'll have enough at one point. But then if you keep doing it, she may not breed again in her lifetime because she just doesn't have enough reserves again, or it might be another 5 or 10 years before you breed her again. So I remember there's like a happy medium where you feed a lot, but it's in a condensed time, but you don't overdo it like ball python people do it. There's like a happy medium.
How often do you feed your Bothrocylus?
So I feed maybe weekly or bi-weekly now, but it's smaller prey and I might feed them more often because I'm kind of in the mindset of smaller prey, more frequent causes more weight gain compared to larger prey causes more growth rate. And I only say this because I've grown some animals beyond the size limit that most people realize it. Like I have a Savu python that's 6 foot long, 6 foot something long. I have a I had a Maclot python. She got up to 9 foot long. But this is the thing. I had a pair of both of them, but I fed the male a lot too. The Savu Python, he got pretty big. But the two Maclots were siblings I got from Ryan Young back in the day. And I would never give the male anything bigger than a small rat. But the female, every time she got bigger, I would up her, mediums I don't see in her anymore. So I'm going to give her a large. Oh, now an extra large. Now jumbos, whatever it is. And her body would compensate for that and just keep growing and growing and growing. And he's under 6 foot. He's like 5.5 foot and about as big around as my thumb. She got 9 foot long, and I mean, she got this big around at some point. So To me,
Basically, olive python almost.
yeah, well, and she was bigger. She's bigger than my olive python, and and then I think you see it in Superdorf retics, where I remember hearing Cameron from Bushmaster and Daniel Solis, who's gone over those seams, said they would see 5 and 6 foot gravid females, and you would never see any of them over 7 foot long. They would always be super tiny. But in captivity, at minimum, you get them at 7 to 8 foot long. In most cases, they get 9 to 12, 11 feet long. Well, why is that? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with, if you look at the way retic people feed, they feed those animals rabbits, pigs, these big prey sources, where on these islands, which I've seen these caves, they're eating bats. Their primary diet in my mind are bats. So they're probably eating during certain times of the years when those caves are populated with a group of bats. They're probably doing a lot like with birds and with like island boas. They're just eating a bunch of them at once, get enough fat reserves, reproduce, and then wait for the season next to come and rebuild that body size again. Because it doesn't make sense. If you stay 5 to 6 foot long, you could eat probably 1 to 5 bats, maybe a little more, a little less, and do fine. But if you got the 10 to 12 foot long bat the size of a small or adult mouse or small rat, you're going to have to eat a whole lot of them to sustain that body size. So I think you see it in a lot of them. And then in another instance, so I remember hearing people in ball pythons, you don't see those 6 foot monsters anymore. Well, if you notice, the ball python trend is to feed a lot of ASFs, which are between like a small rat or a big mouse size, which is a small prey item for a ball python. A ball python in the wild can eat Gambian pouch rats, which are these giant, the size of a chihuahua, nearly sized rodent. I mean, they're bigger than our Norwegian rats. And I think that's why you see those giants and ball pythons. And now you only see fat ball pythons. You don't see long ball pythons, but you see real fat 4 foot.
Why do you think Angolans get so big and hold their body weight, even though? Because like I have year and a half old Angolans, and I'm only feeding them every 2 weeks an adult mouse each, just because I'm worried about the whole regurg thing, even though they've been totally fine. But they hold that weight, like they're not like losing weight or anything. They just keep their kind of weird Angolan kind of shape to them, even though you
Well,
don't feed them as big of a meal.
oh, I there will be a point where they'll peter out, and you'll notice they'll slow down because like I'll feed big meals to a lot of pythons, and then like at some point what they I'm trying to think of an example of something. So like a ball python, whenever typically I'll feed like a 200-300 gram ball python, which is I don't it's hard to say, I don't know, maybe that big around. I'll start feeding like small, I don't even know, I guess they would fit under small medium sized rats. I'll feed them really big prey items to where they look like they ate a football, but then I don't give them anything typically bigger than that unless I'm just not going to breed them. Then I might give them one big rat and then not feed them for months at a time. So, and I've noticed, like I said, if you continuously feed larger prey items, their bodies will compensate to be able to handle that larger prey item. So like I said, I've seen this in white lips, or white lips, maclots, savus, ball pythons. I've seen it in other snakes like Superdorf retics, like from other people, and Angolans. I think were another. Like my Angolans are small. Like my breeder female this year was only 6 foot or less, maybe a little less than 6 foot, and she's only like, I mean, I don't know, that big around. She's not very big. She's pretty moderate size. But I've seen monster Angolans because
Oh yeah,
some
Dom. I'm
people.
I'm gonna see Dom's old trio because my buddy got them, and
Okay,
apparently they're pretty big.
Oh, I heard
so
Casey. I heard Casey had some 8 foot monsters back in the day.
so not 8 feet, but that trio, that one big female is a precision line from Europe that Tyrone now has, and she's over 10 now. I don't remember the age. I want to say she's a 2016, maybe 2015, and she's bred for me twice, I think, in that old time. But the funny thing about, you were talking about regurgitation, that's the one thing I don't get about Angolans. If you feed them something too big, and that female is maybe 5.5 feet, and probably about I don't know, like this big round. Like she's got good size. She's around the size of like a big, like a bit of a chunky ball python, but in a longer body, right? But if you feed her anything larger than like a medium rats, she'll regurge. But the funny thing is, she can regurge. Then you feed her just a normal size prey at a medium rat or under, and no issues forever until if you feed her something too big, then she regurges. And it's one of those things where, and I've heard that from so many people with Angolan pythons,
Yeah.
and you hear that all the time. Don't feed your Angolan python anything too large. But even if they regurge, it's not an actual problem. It just means feed her something small, and then they're perfectly fine forever. And
Yeah.
I'm saying small. A medium rat is still a decent meal, and like that snake can take a medium rat any day, no issues like that. But even though she'd have zero issues feeding on a large or a jumbo rat, if you did that, I guarantee she wouldn't hold it down. Which I
So
don't get why they do that. Anyway, sorry, go
so
ahead.
that's interesting. I was just talking to people about that Angolan thing because it's such a seems like more common that people just don't talk about, but I've ran into that issue. So my issue was, man, there's so many like theories I have in my head that was running through like Tim Bailey. I was talking about this, Michael Pinnell. We didn't even bring up Angolans, but he just said out of nowhere when he came over to the building or my facility not too long ago, and he just out of nowhere, me and Tim were talking about this prior, but he had no prior knowledge, and he just goes, "You guys ever had issues with your Angolans regurging after for whatever reason, starts regurging?" And we were just like, "That's funny you say that." Me and Tim were just talking about this, and so I had because Ryan was Ryan's one of those dudes like if he calls bullshit on a lot of people's like they're like these make believe stuff he doesn't believe in like originally regurg and Angolans he was like that too. He was like, "Oh, I've never had a problem." Till this past year, I guess he said he had a female he moved and he was starting to have issues. She started regurging. Well, I noticed when I had snakes in quarantine, I brought them into the collection. They cleared quarantine. I brought them in, and I'd start feeding them because, like I said, I would do the bigger prey item method, and I start running into that issue with some of them where they start regurging. Well, a part of me wonders if something triggers the first regurge, the sheer fact of the prey item coming up, and if it scars the stomach or the throat, and then whenever they eat something big again, it stresses that out when it's too big, and they spit it back out. But then I heard Tim said, "I wonder if it's because the dirty substrate, like in the rodent bedding, like because I hate most people." Most people don't want to admit it, but when you're breeding a group of rats, typically, before breeding, like if rather it's someone selling or getting ready to feed their own stuff, they put them all in one big ass tub. And if you do that with them, just literally just a day, they'll shit up that whole tub with a bunch of shit and piss and just make it gross. And you take them, you throw them out. Well, probably more often than not, they have that on their fur and stuff like that, or they're picking food up and stuff if in their pores or not or something. And I wonder if their stomachs are more sensitive to that. And then I remember listening to Ron St. Pierre on MJ's podcast about the whole fruit thing. And I dabbled with that for just till I got tired of buying the fruit. And it seemed to do something, but it's so anecdotal. I wouldn't say for sure. It was like, this is interesting. And like I said, I didn't test it that long at all. It was only just like a handful of feedings I did. And I seemed to had some sort of success. So there was all sorts of theories I was like running in my head because what makes that different? Because I saw a picture of a wild Angolan eating a rabbit or a hare or whatever the species is in that area. Rather, it regurgitated it up later. I don't know. No, there was no after video or picture of it. So they will eat big prey items, but rather they can hold those down. I don't know. I don't know if it's like the same issue we have with black-headed pythons, where Australians don't seem to have issues getting them to hatch or breed or eat,
Maybe
but
it's a
we do.
hotspot thing,
Yeah,
right? Them being from maybe we need to keep them with a bulb and give them a 100-degree hotspot for them to use when they specifically eat like a large meal, so
well,
they can
I did
digest it
that.
quicker.
I did that,
Oh, okay.
and it. I think it stressed her out, or not her, but them out, and made them regurge. Because I noticed that I kept them cooler, they seemed to be handled a little bit better. But again, if I fed one male I have in particular has a real issue with this where I'll feed him. He's like a 2020 or 2021, and he should be a lot bigger. That he could eat a small rat, but he only eats things the size of like a popper small mouse. Otherwise, he'll spit it back up. But he's still fine. He doesn't. He's lean. He's definitely lean. I'll say that. But he doesn't change. Like he's always willing to eat it. He doesn't deter him from eating. It's not like he's chronically wasting away. He just cannot get past. And then that's what made me think of, well, these aren't big prey items. I would jump him up to like a medium adult or whatever, a little bit bigger adult mouse, and he would spit that back up. And I'm like, something, I don't know if it does with because they spit it up where there's still fur on it. So it's not like it's mostly digested. It's something to do with like that, either the hair. I've never tried hairless rodents, but it's hard to say. I remember when those Angolans were in quarantine, I didn't have a problem with them eating. They were eating lab rodents, which are cleaner than our captive, feeder rodents in the hobby typically are. And I don't know. So that's what made me think, well, maybe does it have to do with clean? Because once I got him out of quarantine and moved him over and we had a rat colony pick back up again because or rodent colony, it was really dwindling because of the moving into the building. But once we built that back up again, I started feeding them my rodents, live rodents again. So I don't know. It's interesting. There's so many experiments I want to do just to see what could be causing it, but it's interesting. It seems like it's not like a one person thing. It sounds like if you keep even a small group of Angolans, you will almost certainly have this problem at some point in time.
So I'm not sure about the cleanliness thing because I think it depends on how you feed your animals. But like my rodents, I'll put warm water, rub all the rodents together, get most to separate them and all that. Then I'll change that water. I'm going to change water probably 3 times easily before those rodents are ready, right? And the water initially is dirty. The second water is pretty damn clean. The third time the water is in there, it's crystal clear with the rodents in there. So it's an interesting theory. I'm not sure it really is that. The only thing I'll say that's weird about the Angolans, like if you take like emerald tree boas, they regurge once they're fucking done, right? Those most of those will end up dying. The thing with the Angolans is they regurge once, you wait 2 weeks, then they'll go 2 years of zero issues.
Yeah,
like
I've had
and
that
like
too.
my big female actually has regurged once, then waited 2 weeks, ate bread, had babies, had eggs, and no issues, and has been doing great ever since. Like I've had regurges, and I've heard it from a lot of people, but it doesn't seem to be a long-lasting issue. Sorry, go ahead.
Like white lips
I've never
and
seen
rings.
that one.
Apparently they have hairballs. I've seen it on the Angolan Project page. That guy posted a video of one of his adults doing
I've
a
had
hairball.
one of mine. I've seen one of mine
that's
do
just
it.
weird.
Yeah, but I almost think that might be something a lot of pythons do that people just don't realize have done before, because I've seen hairballs in some other species before. I wonder if it's just an accumulation of hair after a while, that it's just, especially if they've been in abundance of eating and they just have a bunch of it, that they just pack it up after a while. But I've seen it. Yeah, I have seen that before. Or like in the Angolan's case, I've seen a lot of bones in their poop, where like more bones than I would see in most of my other pythons, which is interesting. So part of me would almost wonder, is it a gut biome thing? Like you move them and you mess up their gut biome, and it's causing issues with digestion in general. I don't know. Like moving can trigger
Yeah.
that, just like with even humans, if you move, sometimes you can have gut biome problems from moving because it's a stressful, diet change, heat change, just moves, stress levels and everything.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's most likely digestion, and even if your husbandry is perfect, it might be just an animal that's so stressed out that will just not use the heat or something like that, right? And I feel like, because I mean, I look at every single python here, you shouldn't see bones in their feces, right?
Yeah.
So if you're seeing that, then why? And my thinking is, if your husband is perfect, it's an animal that's choosing not to take care of himself because of stress related issues, or because something like that's happening, that it would rather hide in a cold corner away from everything to then digest its food, and then it's poop and partially digested. Anyway, that's where my brain is going.
Yeah. Well, I've tried the heat thing. The heat thing, the only way I can describe it is if I don't have issues with other Python, why am I having issues with this one particular? Because I keep everything ambient, so everything stays similar temperatures. Some obviously higher spots will get warmer than lower spots, but I'll keep certain groups of species higher, some medium, and some lower, depending on what they can handle or take. I've heard humidity being another potential issue if we keep them too humid, but I've gotten mine pretty dry, and I still remember having some regurg issues with that even. So I don't know. It's like I said, it's hard to say. I think it could be an amalgamation of all kinds of things, not just one specific thing. I think it falls under one of those situations where like unless you narrow it down, you'll probably never really know for sure what it is.
Yeah, for sure. They're a fascinating species though. I can't
Oh
wait to
yeah.
get mine into cages and get to watch them in the snake room.
I was thoroughly surprised. There's some big ass babies. Those
Oh
babies
yeah.
that they weren't so much girth. They were girthy, but like they weren't much more different than my baby ball pythons on average. But they were like 18 inches long almost. I mean, they were long. Like I keep them in V18 tubs. They were nearly as long as that tub was.
They're huge and super easy to get going. Like
Oh yeah,
zero issues. I thought they were like a joke. Like it's to me it
yeah
was the easiest python to get started. Like
yeah they ate the minute I put the mouse in, they
like
all took it immediately.
like
I,
hopper mice easily. If you could have almost I could have almost fed him like adult mice to start with. That's
Yeah.
how their heads almost like an inch wide when they're born.
Yeah, they didn't hesitate for sure. They went right to it.
and they're so variable too. Like
Yeah,
some of the there's some I've seen some super light ones, and then like the patterns all different and very like they're just super neat.
yeah, there's all kinds of looks to them. Striped ones, like you said, lighter, dark ones, speckled one. I've seen real speckled ones. Um, different. You can get weird head shapes. Like you'd see different, not head shapes, but head patterns even. That's a species that you almost hope never gets morphed because that those animals will get. It's bad enough ball python people want to breed them into their ball pythons. So
Oh yeah.
God forbid if that group of snakes ever get morphs brought in. The sad part is their morphs would probably be pretty, you know, I'd hate to say ugly, but I don't think they'll be very appealing because of just how their colors and patterns generally are. You know, compared to the other pythons in that group. But that's just a guess. I don't. We don't ever. You don't rarely get very many of them imported anyways or collected. So you
Yeah,
know, chance
because
of that.
their gene pool is pretty small, but it's very variable for a really tiny gene pool, which is pretty neat.
Yeah.
So I hope long term they hopefully that they do well. I thought they were honestly oversaturated the market like a year ago. I saw like 3 4 clutches for sale in Canada, and people were still trying to get $1,000 a piece,
Oh
kind of
yeah.
thing. So it's
Yeah.
but it still hasn't really dropped. So even if they become a $300 to $500 animal long run, that's not too bad either.
They're
So
kind of like that closet breeder, like those. Not closet. They're like the. I notice like ball python people. You'll get like a group of ball python, like newer people. They get ball pythons and they'll see Angolans and they go, "Oh, cool, this is neat looking." Get it? Then they go, "Oh, now I'm bored because there's no morphs in it, so I lost interest." So now they're just like, "No, I don't care." And then they'll kind of peter out and die off into not die off, but shrink as far as popularity. And then a new crop of ball python people come in that's never heard of Angolans. They'll get them and be like, "Oh my god, this is so great!" And then they're like, "Oh, now it's boring because I don't have anything morph wise to breed it to,
yeah,
other unless they decide to breed it to their ball pythons, of course."
I
So
think the issue, if I guess issue or good thing for Angolans, is that they need much longer to hit maturity.
oh
I
yeah,
feel like it's really hard to get a girl under 5 years old to go. So the average that I hear people is usually the sixth or seventh year is when they breed really well. And the second thing is I don't know many people that are able to make their girls go every year. Most of the people they tend to always get them every second year, and for us, both of our girls, I've never ever gotten the same girl to go year to year. they've always gone. If it was 1 year girl that went 1 year, she didn't go till the second year, and we still tried the year in between, and she was fully ready. For us, the second year for each girl was always the way to go. So
Yeah.
it's just a couple of thoughts.
Even males, like I had my male didn't actually start courting visually till he was sick this year, and he's a 2019, 6 years old. He took a while. Like he would, I had one female slug out her first year, but I never saw courtship between him and her. And then the second female, he didn't do anything. And then this year, he's finally, I would actually catch visual locks, you know. But that's just him. I've had some African imports that I got that were like half unrelated to our stuff, and then Namibian locality stuff from wild caught parents. I got some of those in. Some of those bred a little younger. One of them did. One of them was breeding at like 4 years old, but you know, still took them a little while to figure it out. So yeah, they definitely don't seem as fast as the especially ball pythons. I think that's another reason is ball python people are so used to such a fast turnover that when it doesn't happen in the first year or two, they just get bored of it or don't want to deal with it anymore. And then the next person gets it and ends up having success with them as long as they weren't fed to oblivion or something, you know?
Yeah.
Because I've seen some really fat Angolan pythons. I've seen like melted looking Angolans so they can get fat if you feed them too much.
Oh yeah. I think
So,
Dom
Mike-
wants to wrap it up here pretty soon.
Yeah,
gonna
my
have
phone's
to.
about to dead. I'm like at 10%
Perfect.
right now.
So, Mike, right before, I'm just going to say Tyrone, I bet you the big girl's going to go for him this year and not the little one. Only because the little one went last year, the big girl didn't go last year. I'm just curious to see. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I'll
William,
see it when I see him.
All right. William, honestly, that was awesome. You're a great guest, and I 100% really want you to come back on another time because I feel like we literally just shoot the shit about everything and nothing specific, which was awesome to me. Like, I didn't even know what we'd put as the title, you know? Like, we didn't actually talk about one thing specifically. It was just all over, which was great talk, and I will hate you tomorrow morning when I get up in 5 hours, but great show. That was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, William, for filling in last minute because Ron wasn't feeling too good today. So hopefully we get Ron St. Pierre on soon. But I knew this was going to be a great show because I know you're really good at talking, and you need to bug Dave and Junior to get you on more on their podcast again.
They just posted, like it came up on my phone. They're wanting to start a new podcast, and you know Dave.
Another new one.
Well, he actually his own little thing because I told Dave he's a great podcaster. He can bullshit with almost anyone. And the name of the podcast he wants to start is Herps in Your Mouth. Yeah, that's Dave's humor for you. You should see the picture of it. It's pretty interesting.
I'm sure.
Oh, jeez. So, William, where can people find you if they want to chat with you? Want to put out your details?
Yep, TJW Exotics on the Facebook, Instagram. I even have an X account. You can find me on my website at TJW Exotics. Then Morph Market, of course, and I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. Or Facebook, you just William Filipek. You know, you can just friend me on there too.
Awesome. Michael Gillian on Facebook, and myself, Dominic Kelvin on Facebook, or Dom's Reptiles. For Reptile Rejects on Instagram. If you hit us up on there, Michael will reach out to you. For everybody following us on YouTube, we tend to go live every Sunday unless the guest doesn't want to go live. And if you miss the live, you're
next Saturday. We'll be live. Next Saturday for the.
We got to talk about that. But if you miss the live, it's always aired 1 week after. So this one will be aired 1 week after. And next week, it is Saturday at 8. It is our holiday show. It will be a mess. It will be awesome. I am planning on drinking. Mike's planning on drinking. I think Shan's planning on smoking.
Chris will be drunk, so it'll be great.
There you go. It's going to be just a shit show. We've invited many guests. You know what? The invitation will be to you as well, William. If you want to hop on, we'll send you a link. You can just hop on for 5 minutes, take a few shots with us, or stay on. We'll see. We have no idea how many people we can actually have on, so it's going to be just a messy show with no real purpose. But welcome to the hallway show, Saturday at 8, if anybody wants to join. To everyone, thank you for logging on. Thank you for listening. William, you rock. Thanks a lot. That was a great freaking show. And everybody, will see you next week, Saturday at 8 for our holiday show. Everybody, have a good night. Thanks, William.
See you.